Michigan Youth Empowerment Foundation's
Inspiring Role Models Virtual Conference
aims to motivate youth to fully invest in themselves
and explore their passions.
We aspire to bring people of different interests together
for collaboration and innovation.
Our speakers and panelists include inspiring leaders in business,
STEAM, and activism around the world,
who will share their stories
and offer guidance
to uncover your true potential.
Together we can build a better tomorrow.
Welcome everyone to the opening ceremony of the 2021 Inspiring Role Models Virtual Conference. As high school students ourselves, we understand the fear of the unknown and the overwhelming pressure of entering the so-called real world.
With that said, as adolescents strive to develop a sense of identity and purpose, role models become important in helping identify the behaviors, attitudes, and qualities that make up an impactful leader.
For me, stories and storytelling has been a bridge to help get people in the room, help people feel engaged, help them see that they have their own real-world superpower. Life is hard. The world isn't easy, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't show up. As you go about this conference, as you think about the impact you're making, I hope you'll think about your superpower and who you could share it with.
Now the question is, what should I post about? I get this from students all the time. Public speaking is useful literally everywhere. Class presentations, especially when you've forgotten your script. Interviews, running an organization, leading a meeting, or ordering at a restaurant.
If you're doing what you love and you get paid for it, to me, that is a win-win-win. My last piece of advice is just get started today, because entrepreneurship, it looks so different for everyone. There's no clear road, there's no clear path, so you have to make your own way. This has never been done before.
So what are the problems we're trying to solve over at Emerging Works? Job opportunity. One of the biggest problems contributing to mass incarceration is recidivism. I am a firm believer that technology can equal liberation, because provided the right opportunity, lives are going to be changed. And I know that because my life was changed. My life was changed. My life was changed.
As I've been talking about, technical education isn't accessible to everyone. It should be, but it isn't. Learning is just such a beautiful thing, and for us, it all probably looks different. Some of you may be artists, and you learn your craft. Some of you may be future engineers or present engineers. There is so much for all of us to learn.
And then, this whole talk is hopefully going to give you an idea of what you can do instead to really build for longevity, to do what you love. And I do want to emphasize, don't be reluctant to apply, because you won't have experience until you have experience.
And so this is what our Robots at Mobot looks like. 3 years in, it required some courage to just take a look at where I was at the time and figure out, is this really where I want to be? Just because I've been doing the same thing for the last, 5 to 10 years, is that what I want to be doing the next 5 to 10 years?
Think about the subjects in schools that you hate the most. If any of those external incentives were taken away from doing that thing, would you still have any will to learn about it? Would you still learn about it if those things were taken away? I would wager, for the most part, no. This system of reward and punishments creates a huge issue for our curiosity.
We also just want to thank our entire IRM ambassador team. Each and every one of you played a role in the success of this conference, and it was our honor to work with all of you.
In addition to the efforts of our ambassadors, our partners have spent copious time and effort to help this conference reach heights beyond what we could have ever imagined.
So congratulations to all of the winners for our 9 raffle giveaways. Look out for an email from us shortly.
As a student-led youth committee with less than 20 members, we have never undertaken such a project, and I would be lying if I said we weren't overwhelmed in some situations. However, the most significant part of it all is that we didn't give up on ourselves and we didn't cap off our potential. Thank you all for attending the Inspiring Role Models Virtual Conference this weekend. This conference would not have been possible without you, and we hope you leave learning something new about yourself. We hope you feel empowered and, of course, inspired.
Jessica and I were honored to be your host this weekend, and once again, thank you so much to each and every one of you. We hope you enjoyed spending time with us during this conference. And finally, we just hope that all of you have an amazing rest of your day.
Michigan Youth Empowerment Foundation's
Inspiring.
Welcome everyone to the opening ceremony for the 2024 4th Annual Inspiring Role Models Virtual Conference. My name is Olivia Xu.
And my name is Minghan Xu. We're the co-presidents of Michigan Youth Empowerment Foundation's Youth Leadership Committee and your host for this event. Michigan Youth Empowerment Foundation, founded in 2016, is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering students K-12 with the tools and knowledge necessary to succeed in the 21st century. Our programs are designed to foster students' interest in STEAM, leadership, and entrepreneurship, helping to bridge the gap between academics and real-world applications. Our initiatives include youth STEAM courses, community impact, and early career exploration.
In the past, we have hosted multiple events, such as volunteering and teaching at libraries including the Pontiac Public Library, Detroit Public Library, and Hazel Park Public Library, where we teach classes on art, programming, science, graphic design, and chess.
During the holiday season, we host events for kids, like making holiday cards for homeless shelters. Last year, we made over 300 handmade cards that we donated to Hope Shelter.
Aside from promoting education for children in elementary and middle schools, we also have our annual college seminar, where we discuss how to prepare for college throughout high school, as well as tips for how to write your college applications. If you missed this year's college seminar, don't worry. There is a recording of the seminar on our YouTube channel. The link to the video is being sent in the chat right now.
On our YouTube channel, you can also find our Beat Shorts videos. We cover everything from general knowledge and interesting facts to important safety tips.
If you're interested in volunteering with Michigan Youth Empowerment Foundation, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter and follow our social media accounts to get updates on events and volunteering opportunities. Openings for high school students who are interested in becoming Beat interns will open in the fall. So if you or someone you know is interested, make sure to keep an eye out. And now, we would also like to recognize our conference partners: Illuminate Business, the MYE Beat team, Envision STEM, Words Beyond World, and the Youth Equity Project. We truly are grateful for your support, and we couldn't have done this without you. And now, the Michigan Youth Empowerment Foundation is honored to begin the conference. In school, we learn about things like trigonometry and Shakespeare, but we don't often get taught how to make a real impact in our community. Some of the most influential people in history have shown us the way by leading through their actions. That's why we've brought these inspiring speakers here today to showcase young leaders who are making a difference in chasing their dreams.
We are excited and honored to introduce the 4 guest speakers presenting today. This schedule and our speaker's bio can also be found on our website, which is currently on the screen.
To start, from 1:10 to 1:55 p.m. EST, Austen Brantley, a self-taught professional sculptor from Detroit, will talk about the art of purpose.
Then, from 1:55 to 2:40 EST, Simone Ispahani, founder of Social Brew, an organization that spread love, support, and recognition to victims of human trafficking, will talk about Beyond the Cup, turning passion into purpose.
Afterwards, from 2:40 to 3:25 p.m. EST, Ahron Wayne, an X-ray engineer known for his use of CT scanners to look inside Pokemon card packs, and SQ Mah, an AI engineer at Google known for his work in the Vis-a-Vis challenge, will talk about peeking into stuff with AI and X-ray.
Lastly, from 3:25 to 4:10 EST, we have Joshua Posthuma, an international chess master, who will be speaking about mastering your passion, lessons from chess. If you have any questions or issues that arise throughout the conference, please email ylc@myefound.org, which you can find in the chat, and someone on our team will get back to you as soon as possible. Feel free to take a screenshot of this slide now.
If you have any questions for our speakers during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A section on the Zoom webinar. If you're watching from YouTube, please type your questions into the live stream chat. We will answer questions during the Q&A section of the seminar after each speaker's respective presentation. We will prioritize answering the questions asked in the Zoom webinar first, though.
We will now go over one of our yearly traditions at IRM, the raffle. You will all be given one opportunity to enter the drawing at the end of each presentation. This pertains to both our audience on the Zoom webinar and those watching the live stream on YouTube. We will be giving away multiple different prizes, including a Bluetooth speaker, Bluetooth keyboard, Apple AirTag, digital camera, and AirPods. Be sure to stick around until the end to have the highest chance of winning a prize.
All you have to do to enter is to scan the QR code on the screen for each event and fill out the Google form. A new QR code will be presented after each session. The QR code for our first raffle of the conference will be displayed soon. All winners will be emailed a few days following the conference. Here is our first raffle of the event. Please scan the QR code right now for a chance to win one of our 5 raffle prizes. Our first speaker will begin talking at 1:10 p.m. EST. So, wait for that.
And now, without further ado, let's invite our first speaker, Mr. Austen Brantley. Austen is a self-taught sculptor from Detroit, Michigan, and has been a full-time professional artist since 2014. His work has been showcased in numerous exhibitions across the country, including upcoming 2024 show at Contemporary Art in Detroit and the Indie Art Center in Indianapolis.
In addition, Brantley has created significant public commissions, including a bronze memorial for the Tuskegee Airmen in Detroit and a design for the Freedom Monument Sculpture Park at the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, Alabama. He is a recipient of multiple awards, including the prestigious Kresge Arts Fellowship in Detroit last year. He aims to inspire young people by reflecting their experiences in his art and challenging stereotypes, while promoting values of peace, honor, and excellence. We're excited to have Mr. Brantley as our keynote speaker to share how you can to share the art of purpose. With that being said, it is our honor to welcome Mr. Austen Brantley.
Hi, everybody. My name is Austen Brantley. I'm a sculptor from Detroit, Michigan. And this is my work. I've been a sculptor for over 10 years. And in that time, I've made thousands of different pieces, each one telling a different story and leading me on this journey that I call my art and my life. Let's get started. This is a view of my studio in Detroit, Michigan. I work at the Russell Industrial Center. I've been working at the studio for about 3 years now, and usually I'm working on at least 20 to 30 pieces at the same time, sometimes more. In that picture, you can see that I'm working on monuments and small pieces for galleries. And I'll talk more about the process about that. Let's go to the next slide, please. So I want to talk about what we're going to talk about today. And basically, it's about my guide through inspiration and mentorship, the process of my work, the motivation, and lastly, mastery. Let's go to the next slide. So for me, inspiration is everywhere. I feel like every artist is inspiring if you're willing to see the inspiration in their work and to open yourself up to that. I wasn't always the easiest inspired person. I think I was kind of less open to art when I was younger. I thought it had to be a certain way. But as I kept learning, I kind of opened myself up to exploring and to learning different ways of making art. Let's go to the next slide. I started off being inspired by a sculptor named Frederick Hart, who created the ex nihilo design for the Washington Cathedral in Washington, D.C. It's still currently there, and I think it's one of the most beautiful things. I think it's one of the most beautiful sculptures that were done that century in America. Frederick Hart was a sculptor that won a commission just off of a sketch based off the book of Genesis. So he used his knowledge of history and his understanding of art to create this design, and then that was what won him and gave him a full lifelong career of being an artist. Let's go to the next slide. In seeing his work, it really gave me the opportunity to explore beauty. I was about 15 years old on a trip in New Orleans with my family, where we would visit my brother, and I saw these sculptures in a gallery just by happenstance, and they completely resonated with, I think, my soul. Even though I was 15, I had never encountered something like this before. I found out later that these are called bas relief sculptures, where you have a sculpture coming out of a background, and it's the background is flat, but then you have this thing almost emerging from it. And I was so captivated by this, even though I had no idea what it meant. And I think I only made maybe 10 sculptures at that point. being in high school, but I was so inspired by this artist that I've never had any interaction with before. I found out that he had passed on by this time, but his work had just he would have never had to say anything to me just based off what he had made here. These are fragments of his ex nihilo sculpture that's in Washington, D.C., and these ones are in bronze. Let's go to the next slide. These are a lot of sculptors that I look up to. Some of them still living, most of them passed on, actually. What I really appreciate about these artists is that they've dedicated their whole life to their craft. You can see a long journey based off the work that they've done and how they've evolved as artists. Today, these are some of my friends and mentors, Basil Watson, and below that is Woodrow Nash to the left. And then in the middle, during the Harlem Renaissance, that is Augusta Savage, who was a sculptress that actually she was kind of bullied for being a sculptress at first, even by her family, but never gave up on her path and had decided that she was going to be an artist way before anybody gave her permission. Below that is Richmond Barthé, another sculptor who would sculpt the male figure primarily in different aesthetically beautiful ways. I really liked how I've always been inspired by how he captured the male figure and how he can make it graceful. Over to the right of that are sculptors from more of the classical but modern day era. Auguste Rodin, the father of modern sculpture. Definitely a great influence. He's the one that made The Thinker that you guys probably have seen before. And his assistant, Camille Claudel, who did a lot of work with him. That's another French sculptor that also inspires me. Both of them great French sculptors that are world-renowned. Learning about them really helped me dive into not only sculpture, but into what it's like to be an artist and to kind of give your whole heart to it. When I was first starting, I think it was really hard for me to know if this was the right career path because I've never met anyone else who was a sculptor before. And it was really difficult to know which way to go or how to even think about making a living. So I dedicated myself to just learning as much as I could from different mentors. These are some of the ones that I can really name off the top of my head, but I remember adding thousands of different sculptors on Facebook and networking with different artists so that whenever I traveled, I would have an artist to meet, or I would be able to ask for a critique, or I'd be able to ask some type of direction from in terms of getting books or in terms of what workshops to go to. I would make sure that I utilized these artist networks so I could figure out a way of becoming a sculptor. Let's go to the next slide. So I want to talk about exploring beauty and my own awakening, which was done in, I want to say 2012, 2013, where I made these sculptures. The ones in the middle inspired by the bas-reliefs that you saw with Frederick Hart, and these pieces emerging from something. I always felt like I was emerging from something back then. And I think these pieces were a way to say that. And they were extremely hard to make. I remember failing a couple times while I was trying to make these. And the process for them was to take a lot of clay and slab it together and almost form this wall, and then create these figures that were emerging from it. And then I would texture the piece with lava rocks, and I would kind of press them into the clay until I got this earth-like, rock-like texture. And I wanted these figures to emerge from them. And it was like they were discovering themselves, and I felt like I was discovering myself as well. And then to the left and right, you see the emerging hand pieces. I got off the phone with my my first ceramic teacher, and he told me, I didn't even remember this, but the hand in front, I made that in a period of lunch. So I didn't even I didn't even know I was working that fast. But I felt like this emergence even back then about the sculptures that I was making. Okay, we can go to the next slide. And that's these are some of my teachers that I really admire, mentors. To the left is my teacher from high school, who was my first ceramic teacher. His name is Jeff Hartshorn. Right there in the left photo, you can see that he's doing a raku firing. And I remember those because I burned my hand on one. I remember that he was a teacher that really cared about all of his students. If you did anything right in his class, he would make sure that everybody knew exactly what you did right. And he was very passionate about making sure people knew that these pieces were artifacts and that they had a meaning, and that it wasn't just a class, it was about culture, it was about our identity. Ceramics is a process from thousands of years ago that humans have used for a long time. And the necessity for being able to be involved with clay is a part of being human. It's our understanding of nature and the elements. It's our first cultural things where we made vases and cups, bowls, so that we could eat, drink, and we could commune together. Over to the right of that is my teachers that I worked with at Oakland Community College. I couldn't afford art school, so I found out that I needed to kind of have a self-education for myself. So instead of going to art school, I found private lessons, or I went to community colleges where I would take field study classes so I'd have access to ceramic studios, because I wanted to try to build up a portfolio to get a scholarship, and these teachers really helped me. Over to the right of that are my teachers, Brian Booth Craig, sculptor, and David Simon, who teach in Rome every year. They have a workshop there where they bring in different sculptors from all over the world, and they teach for about 2 to 3 weeks. And then you kind of gain all these, it's an intensive program, so you gain all these skills in such a short period of time. And it felt like for me, it was better than going to art school, because I got to meet different artists from all over the world that were practicing full-time artists and sculptors. So me traveling to Italy was a great investment, because I got to not only go visit museums every day, but I got to be in the mind of these sculptors. And over to the right is another sculptor from Poland who I also study with and do workshops with. His name is Gregor Gista. And then over to the right of that is Basil Watson again, and another sculptor who I've gotten a chance to run into. And people talk about how he textures a piece all over the world. Just traveling the world, just hearing about how other people view other sculptors is amazing. Everybody, all your work matters. I think he wouldn't have even known that he was being talked about overseas, but all your work really matters, and it can really make a difference. Let's go to the next slide. So in finding mentorship and investing in my education, I learned that the only way to really get better is by learning from others and really investing that time into making sure that you can be critiqued and be seen the right way. These are some pictures of when I was working in Rome. And before that, I remember that year I had made a piece called I Exist, that's in the middle to the left. That's a piece that really embodied the year that I had in 2017. It was a really hard year for me, and I remember I almost lost everything. I was not a full-time artist during that time, and this piece kind of symbolizes what I had to go through to be able to go to Italy, because finishing this piece 8 feet tall for a collector in Chicago, and I had only a month and a half to make it, and I then had a flight directly to Italy for the summer. I had to finish this piece, and it really embodies the resilience that I had to have, because I'll tell you, the chest broke, and and it was shattered. So I had to completely make a new one out of a material that I wasn't really that familiar with. And I remember after finishing it, a week later, I was in the picture that you see right to the right of that, and that is a picture in front of the David by John Lorenzo Bernini, which most people would say he is the best sculptor that ever lived. So it was, I think that year was really, really impactful for me because it was a great win. One picture, you see me kind of tired sitting down, and the next one I'm happy. So I think that was a really great and powerful thing that happened to me. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is going to talk about my process in creating these sculptures. I study a lot of anthropology, and I study a lot of different societies and civilizations and how they came to be, and how the art was evolved, how it evolved from different cultures before that. In sculpture, we talk a lot about the evolution of sculpture. We talk about how the Egyptians inspired the Greeks, who inspired the Romans, who inspired the classical time period. And now we have modern day art, and all that stemmed from somewhere. Let's go to the next slide. So these sculptures are wood carvings from the Sinufu tribe, from Côte d'Ivoire. And seeing these sculptures was very mesmerizing for me, but I also didn't really understand them. Being from America, we don't really study these in high school. So you have to take it upon yourself to do your own research and to learn what these masks mean and what they symbolize. And there's so many different symbols in all of them. But the one that I was most enraptured by was the figures at the top. They could mean so many different things, but the thing that stood out for me the most is that there was a saying that you sit on the shoulders of your ancestors. And I found that very powerful for me because I always feel like my ancestors are with me in some type of way. They're all in our DNA, all of our ancestors. And I love that communion with them, especially when you're making art. I feel like when you're doing anything creative, it's a way to almost interact with them because they would have been doing the same thing back then. Let's go to the next slide. So seeing those masks, I was inspired by the figures at the top of the mask, and I wanted to recreate that in a contemporary way. So I made these. These are my crown series. And I made them not too realistic, but as realistic as I could do without it taking away from the idea of the sculpture. And then these figures at the top, they act as the modern day figures, while the large pieces are the ancestors, just like the mass. So it almost becomes this ritual. I've made probably 20 of these. And whenever I do a series, I try to do as many as I can in that series so I can really get the idea out. And each one is made in an original way. Let's go to the next slide. This is another piece that inspired me. Over to the left, you'll see this African mask that has cowrie shells in the eyes. I found that really interesting because I was wondering, I think most people will get like a creepy feeling from something like that. But then I realized that the shells are supposed to symbolize wealth, wisdom, and knowledge and power. And I wanted to put that and imbue it in my sculpture. So I made this piece titled Siren, which is based off African sea goddess Mamawata. And as you can see, the textures are kind of the same. So when you look at these two sculptures side by side, you can kind of see the inspiration. You can kind of see how they kind of speak to each other a little bit. Let's go to the next slide. This is my sculpture titled Mountain. I made this in 2022. And if you think back a little bit to my first couple slides, I made a sculpture called the Emerging Figures. They were that bas relief that I used lava rocks with to get that texture. Years later, I had noticed that that same texture could be done in hair, and it would make a figure look like they had African American hair. And for me, that was really powerful because I wanted to show figures emerging from the hair, almost like it was a stone. So I made this piece titled Mountain. I feel like every person, every human being, everything goes back to Africa. And I wanted to show that in some type of way, that our lives are built on the lives of our ancestors and our descendants. Let's go to the next slide. So this part is about my motivation, which has not always been the best. Sometimes I don't know where I'm going or what to do with my talent or what to say with it. Gaining the skills of an artist is great. I think it's very hard to do, and it can take years and years of training and critique and failure. And for me, I think getting the proper motivation to keep learning is really important. To figure out why you want to do something, whether it be any particular reason. I think it's very important to have a why. You get up in the morning and do anything. What's the purpose in it and why it fulfills you in life? Let's go to the next slide, please. I want to talk about a sculpture I made in 2018 called The Dreamer. Over to the left was a childhood friend that I had. And I remember when I first started sculpting, he would always ask me to model for him all the time, annoyingly so. And I'd always say, bro, you're not pretty enough. You're not a girl. I'm not going to sculpt you. But anyways, at some point, I ended up asking him to model for me for a piece. And we had done like maybe 3 or 4 different sketches that day. And then he accidentally did this pose. And I saw something in it. It was really mesmerizing for me. And I think I just snapped this one photo of it and then went back later and sculpted it. And the reason it really inspired me was because I felt like this dreamer. I felt like the world had compressed me and had only available options for me as a teenager. Even they were vast, I didn't really have one that was suited for my true purpose in life. And sculpting this piece was a way of writing a love letter to that happened to me, and making something that would tell the story for me. The Dreamer was done in terracotta clay, and then it was finished with a bronze patina. This piece was exhibited at the National Afro-American Museum in Dayton, Ohio, where it received a lot of recognition and honorable mention. It was a sculpture that really helped my growth. I think this sculpture was the start to what I really wanted to say with my work and developing my voice as an artist. And when we talk about a voice as an artist, it's awesome to have those skills. But if you have nothing to say, then it can get lost. Then things can get lost in translation, and then you're just showing off how good you are, which is great. But the purpose of art is really to add to an overall narrative where we can all say something with who we are. Let's go to the next slide. And that led to this piece. This is My Boy Holds Flower. It was commissioned by the Canfield Consortium on the east side of Detroit. And when they approached me, they asked me to make whatever I wanted to. They told me it was going to be across the street from the Barack Obama Leadership Academy. And I had all these ideas, but the one that really stood out to me was to say something to children, to have something that children could reflect on. And I remember when I was young and I would explore beauty and flowers or whatever you could find out in nature, I was chastised for it. And I wanted a way to kind of convene with that child in me. And maybe he was angry and bitter that he couldn't be who he really wanted to be because of how the world, you know, pressed on him what it needed to be, what you needed to be as a man or a masculine boy. And that type of masculinity wasn't something I really resonated with. So this was a way of saying something back to it. It's a boy holding a flower and just gazing gently at its beauty to not only create something powerful, meaningful, and graceful, but also something that where children will look at themselves and know that it's okay to do that. This piece is permanently installed at the Barack Obama Leadership Academy, and it's something I hold very dear to my heart. Okay, let's go to the next slide. This is another piece I made in 2022. It's made out of stoneware clay, and I finished it with a wood stain. This piece is titled Power in the Struggle because I really like the iconography of the Black power fist, but I've always felt like it's the way our culture and society has worked. It's always something that you have to uphold, and you have to uphold this thing while the weight of the world is kind of coming down on you, and things are always happening, and they're not always the best. And as a Black man, I've always had to hold that up, and no matter what the struggle was, that power needed to be preserved for people that would come after me. So this sculpture was something I wanted to finish and do it the right way, and love doing it. It was about the kind of resilience, but also the tiredness of what I thought it meant to be a Black man and holding up that power and the weight of it. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is a segment on mastery. And for me, mastery is just being a lifetime and good student. And I think any person that dedicates himself to mastery and getting on that level where you are able to say things with your work that many other people can't is a beautiful lifestyle, because you have a goal set in mind whenever you do anything. And the purpose can be kind of daunting, but it can also be liberating that you know what you want to do with your life. And mastery is something that takes you on, it's not a destination, it's a journey, and it takes you on this wild roller coaster of success and failure and learning and unlearning until you find out what you really need to do. Let's go to the next slide. And with that sculpture that you saw, Power in the Struggle, I was able to master that idea. And what I did was I was approached by the Equal Justice Initiative on Instagram. And they saw that sculpture and they loved it so much, even though it was about 28 inches. And they asked me to make it within a year. And I had only 7 months to make a 10-foot monument or 11-foot monument. And I had to produce it in clay and then finish it in bronze within a couple months. So while doing that, I went through a period of a lot of change because I'd never worked on anything that big before or that scale. So it was a way of really showing what I could do. And also it was the rawness of my I'd say my youth, and I feel like if I was a lot older, I don't think I could do that type of piece that quickly. Only having 7 months to make a massive sculpture was something that was an amazing challenge. But I felt like I was doing it for my ancestors at this park. The Freedom Monument Sculpture Park is something where it takes you through a journey through the hardships of African Americans in this country and what we had to go through to be here. They even have a kiosk where you can search your last name, your family's last name, and it'll show you where your family originated from in America, throughout the whole country. And I even looked up my name, and it was a powerful thing for me to know where my people probably came from. In this park, it takes you through this winding journey through the healing and through the understanding of what people went through and human beings went through so that I could be here. Let's go to the next slide. And this is the finished version of that smaller piece called Power in the Struggle. It stands at about 11 feet tall. The figures are life size. And for me, it represents this harmony. When I see it, I always think about the harmony and the balance between the figures holding up this sculpture. Instead of the other one where the figures were sitting down, I wanted the figures to stand up so they almost look like solemn guardians, and they protect the sculpture and they preserve it. And then over to the right, that's my mama. And we got to hang out, and she was really proud of me. She's been working on my art career probably as much as I have, and has been supporting me for the last 10 years. And my mom always is I think she's my worst critic, actually, and my best critic. She always wants me to do the best I can. And it's so important for parents to support us in our journey of finding ourselves. Through this piece, I really found out, I think I knew who I was, but this piece kind of confirmed it and validated that for myself. All the work that I went through to make this sculpture was incredible. I remember not only making it in clay, but I remember having to find the granite base that's at the bottom. I found that at an old marina where I was just exploring on Facebook Marketplace. I was exploring different objects and stuff for a studio, and I accidentally found this abandoned granite that was this thick, and I found a company that helped me cut it, and I carved it myself and then finished it, which is something sculptors don't usually do. Usually they hire a company to do that, but I remember having to work on this whole piece almost by myself. Was something that was really powerful for me, because it's really my baby. It's like that whole thing is me in a way. It's my voice. It's how I choose to communicate in the world, and through a visual language, I feel like it can touch many other cultures just with this piece. I don't even have to say a word. Let's go to the next slide, please. And this is just by the numbers so that you can know I'm not perfect. I've made over 3,000 sculptures, and I've failed a lot. I've failed more times than I can count. I have a couple awards and a couple grants, but for me, the most important thing is that clay is my greatest teacher, and so is failure. I failed a lot of times, and I always look back and think about how I could do things better. And I don't let that haunt me, but I know that there's always room for growth and that I can always keep learning. In the picture to the left, you can see the Tuskegee Airmen Monument that I made for Colonel Alexander Jefferson. And on the right of that is me, the mayor, Coleman A. Young's son, and many other important congressional speakers that spoke at the unveiling. This sculpture was something that I really was impacted by, because they awarded me the commission to sculpt a hero. And through my study of history, I'm always getting to learn about people like this, but when I'm chosen to sculpt someone, I really have to delve into who that person really was. And the sculpture was about a soldier, a pilot that was shot down during World War II and was taken prisoner by the Nazis, where he actually said they treated him better than Americans back home. So he was fighting for a country that didn't even care about him. And when he came back to America, he had all these issues finding work, and he had all these issues being accepted by the very people that he was fighting for. And that was really powerful for me because I wanted to make a statement about that. Because he also after that, he went to teach children and to be an upstanding member of his community. So I wanted to show him almost like sending off this plane of all his hopes and dreams for us. Let's go to the next slide. And this is my work. You can always view my work on Instagram. I also have a website, which is austenbrantleysculpture.com. I post all my failures and my success on there. So there's a whole lifelong journey ahead of me, and whoever wants to follow me on that journey, you're more than welcome. If we go to the next slides, you can see a couple more sculptures that I've made. This is like a seated figure. I've made hundreds of these. They're all original clay sculptures, so all of them tell kind of a different story. I try never to make the same thing twice, exactly the same. I might try and speak on something in a different light, but everything has its own way. Let's go to the next slide. This is my piece titled Condessa. This is on view at the Marshall Fredericks Museum in Saginaw. You could see it at any point in time if you go up there. They also have a beautiful museum of sculptures done by Marshall Fredericks, who was a sculptor that lived in Royal Oak. He also did the Spirit of Detroit that we're all familiar with. Let's go to the next slide. This is my piece titled Mama Wata. There's a version of it that was exhibited in Jingdezhen, China for the International Ceramics Biennial this year. Let's go to the next slide. And then this is my piece titled Tribe. Thank you guys so much for coming to my talk and letting me be your keynote speaker. I think I don't refer to myself as a role model as much, but I try my very best to be someone I would want to look up to. And I try to make decisions based off that. I'm all about adding to the narrative of art, and I know that we're all a part of it and that anybody can be creative. It doesn't matter what you do with or how you do it. It's about the intention and that you want to make this world a more beautiful place. And if you do that, I think in my eyes, you're a winner. So that's my talk. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Austen. We're going to move right into the Q&A section now. So let's start with our first question. How do you deal with the frustration of pieces breaking or not turning out how you want them to?
That's a really good question. Thank you. For me, I think the most important thing is just to let things go sometimes. I think sometimes I have the intention of making something perfect, but sometimes the piece is supposed to just come out the way it's supposed to come out. I think what my goal is with mastery is that you'll be able to envision something and completely make it from that the way you want to make it. But I realized that sometimes you fall more in the middle. It's like doldrums, right? Like if you're selling from Europe and you want to get to this part of, if you're selling from Europe and you want to get to this part of America, the wind is going to take you way more down south. So you have to prepare for that. I think that's just something that comes with time, and it's just about developing that patience with yourself and knowing that maybe that is how the piece was supposed to turn out in the first place.
Okay, thank you for that really insightful answer. Our next question is, what are some tips you have for people who can't afford college or higher education?
For me, the tips that I have is to find a mentor, somebody that is doing exactly the job that you want, and asking them how they did it, asking who their network is, connections with, and even getting critiques on some of the work that they do. Ask them what projects that they worked on that really helped them grow, um, and ask them for direction in terms of doing that particular job, or what other means through maybe private lessons or workshops that you can learn that skill the best way you can, or what avenues to learn that particular skill. I think if you're going in the path of that skill, things will open up for you. That's just my opinion. But I feel like if you do that, and make a network through not only social media, but I'm sure going to different conferences and meeting people like that, I'm pretty sure your world will open up.
Yeah, I agree. Higher education definitely isn't the only way to start or further your career. Our next question asks, how do you deal with artist block or burnout?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm burnt out right now, guys. Not gonna lie. I'm kind of always between 45 pieces and different monuments. I think what really helps me is finding time to relax. Like, I feel like it's really important to have some leeway and to not just be working all the time. Being a workaholic is an easy way to get burnt out. I think it's really important to have a supportive group around you of friends, people that care about you, people that can help you do stuff, people that you can open up to, vent to. And it's really good to have mentors and to not take life too seriously, even though we kind of have to. But I feel like it's really important to remember that we're just human beings, and that we need to relax sometimes, and live our lives and be happy, and to let go sometimes a little bit, and not take it too seriously.
Definitely. Our next question asks, how do you go about getting your work featured in art galleries and exhibitions?
Usually I'll submit my work to open calls, or I'll develop relationships where the galleries will come to me. I think it's really about having a strong body of work that gives you a lot of leverage in the art world, and it's about also the relationships that you cultivate through that.
And we're just going to do probably one or two more questions since we're running a bit short on time. So our next question asks, do you have any advice for people who want to go into art as a career?
Oh, I have so much advice. I have so much advice. And you guys can always go through my Instagram and DM me questions. But I think what's the most advice I can give you is um, to kind of develop a thick skin, because the world is not very kind to artists. It never has been. And that's just something that you learn as you go. And it's developing an inner strength, and kind of a reverence and an audacity that you wake up with, and you want to be an artist. If you really want it, it'll happen, in some type of way. I think that's really important for me, because being an artist is something that gives my life so much purpose that I don't really care about failure as much.
Yeah, looking at your journey, you definitely had to overcome a lot of obstacles in order to get to the place you are right now. So that's really good advice. And for our last questions, if I want to be, this one's kind of similar to the last one we just asked. If I want to be a full-time artist, how do I start?
For me, I can tell you how I started. I started doing art fairs. I remember I made $400 at the first art fair I did, and I had to pay a booth fee. I had to buy a tent, and I just started selling my work. And I used those art fairs. I probably did I did as many as I could all around Michigan and sometimes in other states. But what I mainly focused on was creating art that would touch people's minds and not just trying to make sales. I saw them as an investment for myself um, so that I could not only just sell my work, but I could also make um, a list of supporters. I would gain followers and supporters that would keep pay attention to my journey. The more I did that, the more I grew as an artist, and the more I developed that following, the more they would tell other people about my work. And that led me to being able to afford traveling and studying abroad. And that's where I gained the skills that I really needed to really make the creations that I wanted to make.
Thank you for your advice, and thank you, Mr. Austen Brantley, for joining us today. This was a really insightful presentation, and I'm sure everyone learned a lot. We're now going to move on to our raffle quickly, and then our next speaker will be beginning in 2 minutes, Simone Ispahani, the founder and CEO of Social Brew. So make sure to stay tuned for that. Thank you, Mr. Austen Brantley, for talking with us today.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
You too.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second presentation of the day. My name is Brenda, and I will be your moderator for this event. To start, I am excited and honored to introduce Simone Ispahani, the founder of Social Brew. Although born in Colorado, Simone grew up all over the world, moving to the Netherlands, Australia, and Hawaii. She would later make her way to Los Angeles for college, where she attended Biola University and graduated with a degree in sociology with an emphasis in criminal justice and a minor in biblical studies. As a biracial woman and someone intimately acquainted with a diverse array of cultures, Simone has a unique understanding of the world, contributing to her deep-seated desire to help humanity. While at Biola University, Simone was empowered to join the fight against human trafficking after hearing from an expert speaker on modern-day slavery. She would go on to learn as much as she could, including reading articles, watching documentaries, and speaking to people on the front lines of this issue. Soon after, Simone's passion for activism and a great love of coffee led her to launching Social Brew in 2021. Social Brew is an e-commerce coffee company that donates 50% of its profits to 2 nonprofit organizations working to fight against human trafficking. Her goal is to create a community where trafficking victims are seen, recognized, loved, and given practical tools to help them take back their lives. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please type them in the YouTube chat or in the Q&A feature on Zoom. We'll have time for a Q&A session at the end. Additionally, make sure to stay until the end to enter our raffle. And without further ado, please welcome Simone Ispahani, who will be speaking on Beyond the Cup, Transforming Passion into Purpose.
Thank you so much, Brenda. I appreciate it. All right, let me just get my. Okay, so transforming passion into purpose. Can everyone see? All good? Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, so here I just wanted to give you guys a little snapshot. As Brenda had mentioned, I kind of grew up all over. So I grew up in the Netherlands, Australia, and Hawaii. So I just kind of wanted to show you guys a few pictures so you get a feel for just who I am as a person. So the top right, we have the Netherlands here from one of my favorite places. I love flowers, so it's this huge flower garden called the Kokenhof. And then the bottom right is actually a picture of my family. So I have one older sister, Abby, and then I have my Aunt Val, my mom, and my dad. And then we have the Sydney Opera House in the middle, Hawaii in the bottom left. But I really want to focus on the top left picture. That's a picture from Romania. So one thing about just being privileged to have grown up all over the world, my parents decided to start a family foundation called the Master's Peace Foundation when I was probably about 7 or 8 years old. We started going to Romania and India when I was quite young, and we would partner with various nonprofits and basically do service work and volunteer wherever we could. So that's one of those pictures from that trip. We worked with children with special needs in the school system there, trying to just get them, whatever educational resources we could help with. They didn't have a lot of access to things like that at that time. We also worked in the Children's Oncology Unit at the main hospital in Bucharest. And trying to get them better medical resources. So that was just kind of some of the stuff we did. I'm half Indian. My dad's from South India. So for me going there growing up, and getting to see family, a lot of my aunties were involved in education and were teachers and principals. And so we would also go to the schools and, figure out where we could help there and what they would need. So I definitely feel like that was a seed that was planted when I was very young, which ties into what I'm doing today with Social Brew. So yeah, it's really fun to look back and reflect on that. So how did Social Brew come about? For me, it was actually in college. I went to a small school in Orange County, California. And it was probably the end of my freshman year or beginning of my sophomore year that one of my best friends, there was an awareness week happening on my campus about human trafficking. And she said, will you come to this talk with me? And I'm like, sure, I have obviously heard about the issue, but it wasn't really something that was really on my radar or that I knew a lot about. And so I went to this talk kind of unknowingly, but by the end of it, I was honestly sitting at the edge of my seat. And I remember the speaker saying, once you hear, you can't unhear. And something about that statement just really, captivated me. And I remember leaving that talk just being like, just energized and pumped up. And my friend and I were like, okay, what do we do now? Where do we go? How can we make a difference in this? And so we just started with educating ourselves, really. We started just reading articles, watching documentaries. I would reach out to anti-trafficking nonprofits and, just kind of be like, can I, talk to you guys? Can I see what you guys are up to? And just exposing myself as much as possible and learning as much as possible. So that's kind of how it started with that issue in particular, which is a part of my mission today, which is to donate 50% of our profits to fighting human trafficking. So that's kind of how that first started. And I've always loved coffee. And so for me, I say coffee is a conduit to change. That's kind of like my personal slogan for my business. So it's kind of like I always saw coffee as a connector. And for me, in college, you know, that's where I'd have some of my most meaningful and impactful conversations with friends and various thought leaders, you know, was over a cup of coffee. And so it was my senior year and I was, you know, getting ready to graduate. And I had actually took a trip to India, and I co-led a group of women. So you can see in the top right corner here, that's the lovely group of ladies I got the pleasure to lead a trip with to South India. And we got to work with a local nonprofit there that was working more in the aftercare with a lot of survivors. So kind of these big statistics, like it's $150 billion industry. There's 50 million people trafficked globally. Those are huge numbers, right? And that's hard for us to wrap our minds around. But for me, really getting to meet survivors and hear their stories and putting a face to those statistics really just confirmed that this is something like I want to be involved in. And I didn't know where I quite fit in that equation though. So I remember coming back from that trip, it totally changed my life. I was totally like, I want to do something in this, but I don't know what. And I was fortunate to have, you know, varied experience. One was, you know, it's called the Walk for Freedom. It was in downtown Disneyland with an organization called the A21 campaign that fights human trafficking globally. And then I also got an opportunity to be a part of the editorial staff for a trafficking in persons report for this conference called Nexus Global Youth Summit. And it was held at the UN in New York City. So getting some exposure to kind of the business philanthropy side, but also the nonprofit side. And I knew I wanted to sort of combine the two. So I was back home in Hawaii, visiting family for spring break, not far from graduation. And I remember my dad and I, you know, that's kind of how we bond too. We love trying kind of bougie coffee shops and stuff. We bond over that kind of thing. And so he was just like, you know, what do you think is the next step for you? And I was like, well, I know I want to work with survivors, but I didn't really see myself, you know, as a social worker, like a traditional social worker or anything like that. And I was like, I also have this interest in the business world. And then we just kind of were spitballing and brainstorming together. And I remember I was just like, you know, what if I opened a coffee shop and I could employ survivors and create those sustainable job opportunities? And I was like, we'll call it Social Brew, you know, and it just kind of was joking a little bit. Like I thought, oh, here's an idea, but my dad actually kind of took it seriously and we kind of started planning out what would this look like? What would it take to do this? And then I tabled it, honestly. I graduated. I actually, you know, struggled with chronic illness after graduation. And so for me, I kind of, you know, didn't know, I didn't have something to jump to. And that was a really like disorienting time. But fast forward to it was 2020, I believe. Yeah, March of 2020. I had been working at a granola bar company in marketing and social media. Not really loving it, but learning a lot still. And half of our team got laid off like a month or so into the pandemic. And yeah, and I remember just kind of being back at square one, like many people, like, what is my next step? I applied to, you know, a bunch of different jobs and, you know, that I could do remotely, and just nothing was really panning out. And I remember being a bit like discouraged, but my dad was like, hey, remember Social Brew, you know? And I was like, oh, you know, one day, like, I thought it was a pipe dream. I thought it was something that, you know, wasn't really within reach for me. For some reason, I had this view in my head that it was like, oh, I have to have this illustrious career in something else first before I can go pursue my own thing. My dad, because I come from a long line of entrepreneurs, especially on both my parents' sides, but especially my dad's side, and very like self-made, you know, hustle. And yeah, and so I was kind of like inspired, I remember, by that conversation with him. and then my aunt, and then my mom, they all kind of followed and were kind of in my ear like, hey, remember Social Brew, do you think that's something maybe you'd want to pursue now? So my faith is really important to me. And so for me, I kind of took some time to get grounded. I prayed about it. I thought about it, and my dad was like, hey, like, I'll be your business advisor. I can help you build out your business plan if this is something you really want to do. And honestly, at that time, as many people probably remember, it was such a chaotic time, so much noise out there. I knew I wanted to do something to help people, but I was just like, yeah, how is this gonna happen? So I decided eventually to just take the leap and go for it. And I put my savings into it. And I was like, okay, this is either the best time or the worst time to do something like this. But I'm just gonna see, I'm just gonna try. So, of course, my initial idea was to have a coffee shop, and that's still the goal, that's still the dream. But I thought, oh, let me just start out with e-commerce and test the market, see where we're at. And so, yeah, and so I just kind of started there. That was like step one, and I launched in October of 2021. And yeah, it was just kind of crazy how I found my roaster in Hawaii. I was back home during the pandemic in Hawaii, and it just somehow got connected to him, and he loved my idea and like the vision and mission, and it just kind of went from there. It was just like one thing after another kind of was like falling into place, but I had to also step in with confidence into those various areas. And so, yeah, that was kind of the start of Social Brew. And now, I've been doing it for a couple of years and absolutely loving it. But there are definitely a lot of challenging moments and a lot of things that I've learned along the way. So, yeah. And here I wanted to just kind of spotlight my two nonprofit partners. So since I donate 50% of my profits, it was important to me to have a personal connection or a personal relationship with the nonprofits I'd be partnering with and not just writing a check to. And so I have check-ins with each of them every so often to see how things are going. And yeah, just how their programs are faring. But the first one is called Beautiful Feet Wellness. It's actually run by a survivor, Jenny Footle, who I was introduced to from my friend Laura. And she's based in Colorado, and she's been doing this kind of work pretty much for like the past 10 to 12 years or so, mentoring other survivors who are coming out of specifically sex trafficking. And she is herself certified as a fitness instructor, and she also does dance as well. She's a dance instructor, and she really she kind of has a niche thing where a program that she's developed where it's kind of more this holistic approach. So it's kind of body, mind connection, somatic therapy to help survivors process their trauma. So it's a really unique thing that honestly in this space is still very it's still very new, I think, to a lot of people, but I think it's a really, really cool approach. I knew that we were kind of starting around the same time. She was launching her nonprofit and I was launching Social Brew, and so we've kind of been a little bit on this journey together, and so it's really cool. I got the chance to go to Colorado and meet up with her in person after I launched, and yeah, just getting to know her and the work she's been doing as a person has just been amazing. And then the second one is Ho'olanapua, which is a Hawaiian-based nonprofit on the island of Oahu, which is where I went to high school. And so when I was in college, as I say, when I was in that time of educating myself and seeing where I could volunteer and all of that, I was back home one summer and I remembered just kind of, just searching, okay, what anti-trafficking nonprofits exist in Hawaii. And they were one of the first ones that popped up, like one of three, I think. And I was like, wow, okay, like I know Hawaii is not, population isn't huge, but, I was just surprised there wasn't a lot happening at that point. And because this was about now 10 or 11 years ago. And I just reached out to them and was like, hey, like, do you need help with anything? Can I volunteer? I just want to learn, you know? So yeah, I did some social media stuff for them, marketing stuff for them. I, went to their volunteer training and stuff. And yeah, but it really was started. I got to know the founder quite well, Jessica Munoz, who is actually a nurse practitioner, and she kind of was exposed to this issue working in the ER. And she knew she had to do something about it. And so that's kind of how it started. And they have various amazing programs. But for me, it was important to kind of have a say in like where I know exactly where the money is going. And so one of their newest projects that they opened only, I think it was in 2021, it's called Pearl Haven. And it's a rehabilitation center for survivors, I think between ages 8 and I think all the way up to 30 years old. They have about 30 beds there, and all women and girls at this point. But they have, equine therapy, art therapy. They also have school still. They have classes there. They have cooking classes, group therapy, all of that. So I got the privilege to actually go finally see the facility when I was back in Hawaii a couple months ago, and I've become very close to one of the survivors there that kind of helps run the facility. Her name's Tammy, and I got the chance to interview her on the podcast that I started, and she just has an incredible story. So yeah, that's a little bit about my nonprofit partners. So some things I've learned thus far, I tried to kind of, think about a couple of things I could give you guys some practical things too. So the first one is self-care, both physically and mentally, are equally as important as the work you're doing. That couldn't be a more true statement. I felt like for me, mental health has become a big part of all of these conversations we're having around work, school, all of this in the past couple of years, I feel like, which is so cool. But for me, as someone who struggles with anxiety and depression, and as I say, chronic illness as well, I thought these were all things when I first started that would disqualify me, if I'm being honest, from pursuing a path like this. I just didn't have a ton of confidence that I could do it. But I'm thankful for the support of my family and some really awesome friends that believed in me. And I feel like that confidence, I wish I could say I had all the confidence and I just went for it, but no, I kind of did it scared, and I think it's important, if you want to do something on your own and venture out in that way, is to really make sure you stay grounded, mentally, and take care of yourself physically, and just the basics, eating well, sleeping well, going back to the basics, because it can be all consuming. We live in a world that is very like hustle culture, and that's something I'm trying to kind of move away from. But when I work, that, all the decisions, everything I am doing is intentional. And so it's sort of like, why aren't we that intentional with our mental and physical health too? So the same way we are with work. And so for me, I think that's like one of the top things to keep in mind if you're going to start your own business. And then the next thing is celebrating the wins, big or small. I mean, I wasn't the best at this in the beginning. I kind of was like, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And just always kind of moving forward. And finally, I was like, no, I need to reflect on like what I'm doing. And, it's important, and making sure, like I celebrate that and celebrate my friends' wins as well. I think is a great way of, practicing for yourself too, to celebrate those wins, because that's what you'll hang on to when, times are tough, or when you are discouraged, or your sales aren't as high, or things like that, is to kind of reflect and look back at that. And then the third thing is weekly check-ins for goals and future plans. That's something that's super practical, I feel like, but it's very simple, but very important. Like I have a running massive Excel spreadsheet that I go through tons of tabs, every week and kind of prioritize and reprioritize what needs to get done in each area, whether that's web development, marketing, social media, PR, that you have these various tracks going at once. And I think that goes for almost every business. So. And then a little bit about my leadership journey. So, for me, I don't have a co-founder. So I have, I think it's important to have advisors or business mentors. And I'm lucky enough that 2 of them are my family members. But I think that's super important to start with. And it's an area I'm continuously growing in because I work with a lot of contractors, short-term contractors. And so they're kind of my team, I guess, and that's ever changing and they're across various cultures and parts of the world. So it's learning how to communicate with different personalities and communication styles. So the first one is respectful versus respected. And so what do I mean by that? So basically, I've worked with a lot of people that are quite a bit older than me and quite accomplished in their own area. And so at first I was very intimidated by this, but I think it's something I've definitely grown in terms of finding my own voice, that you can still be respectful, but ultimately you're the one kind of steering the ship. And, anyone on your team, whether contractor or, employee, they are, looking to you to kind of cast your vision and explain what you want and what you expect. And so I think that otherwise, people I've found are going to jump in and kind of tell you what you should do. It's okay to collaborate and hear ideas, but I think I've had to learn to filter through that and find my own voice in that, figure out what do I want and be able to learn to communicate that. And then the next thing is boundaries with others and yourself. So I feel like that kind of, feeds into the last one. But again, it's, you may have someone on your team or a contractor. I've had this happen many times where it's, kind of after hours or on the weekend and they're texting me and they're like, what about this? Or here's this idea, or have you seen this email? And I think for me, it's become more and more important, just like mental and physical health. That's a part of taking care of you, and protecting your time and your peace is so important. Because again, otherwise it can just stir up more anxiety and you're thinking of all the things you have to do, which there's always going to be a running list of when you have a startup. But being able to put that to the side, like on the weekends, or you say, okay, past 6 p.m., I'm not going to, open my email, or I'm going to shut the laptop. Because I struggle with insomnia, and I used to find I was more productive at night because everything was more quiet and everything. But then I had trouble shutting my brain off, which actually just, made my insomnia worse. So I got more work done, but I was, not really sleeping much. And so sleep is so important. So I really recommend, figuring out the right time. When are you most productive, but also like, how can you set yourself up for success within that? And then the next one is clear is kind. I forget where I heard that, but it's just such a simple statement. I think it's such a true statement. Like, I feel like, again, the more you can communicate in a clear way to your team or whoever you're working with, what your expectations are, and hear their expectations. Again, you'll be on a great, healthy path together, because I think it's really easy, whether it's over email or text or whatever, things can be misconstrued very quickly when people have different communication styles, and they have a life too, personal life, they have a lot going on. So it's important to sometimes just, even if there's no really agenda for a call, but to have those check-ins with people. Where are you at? Are we accomplishing the goals we kind of have talked about and set out to have? So yeah. And then the last one is knowing your why. I can't stress how important it is. I've had to sort of pitch myself and pitch my vision to many of people. people like Disneyland or Foodland, which I just did a deal with, which is a big grocery store chain in Hawaii, and I remember just being like, I was nervous for those, but I knew my why. And so I was like, I'm just going to put it all out there. And, if it's not the right fit for them, it's not the right fit. But I think knowing your why is the most important thing, because you're always going to come up against hardships and things that, or people too, that may discourage you from pursuing what you want to pursue. But I think when you have a clear vision and mission and you know what it is in yourself that you want to do, then I think that's an unstoppable force. So I'll leave you with this question. What is one thing that is most impactful to you? I feel like there can be this pressure, especially when you're younger, to have it all figured out before you can to do something big. But I'm here to tell you, I am a living testament that is not true. I do not have it all figured out, and I'm constantly learning and constantly growing as I go. And then the more, you go down that path, you learn that a lot of most people around you don't have it all figured out either. And we're all just doing our best. And so I encourage you to just think about what is one thing that is most impactful to you and start from there. Don't plan the next 10 years of your life. What is something that matters to you and how can you build on that? Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you so much, Simone, for such a wonderful presentation. I really liked how you were very vulnerable about how some of your struggles and that, honestly, nobody has everything figured out. So it's okay to do that. You can still be successful like you are without knowing exactly where you are in life. So without further ado, we're going to move straight into the Q&A session. All right, so I will be reading questions from the chat and you can answer audio. All right, so first of all, what logistical challenges did you face when starting Social Brew and how did you overcome them?
Logistical challenges. Let's see. I feel like everything, honestly. I was like, I don't know where to start. I really was looking at, that's where advisors, as I say, and mentors, and I know your last speaker said that was important too, is to talk to the people that you really are inspired by and you want to kind of follow that similar path to figure out how they did it. So for me, it started with a lot of research too. It was like, okay, if I'm going to start with a website, what are the best platforms? I mean, I use Shopify, but there are so many options out there. So it's sort of, it's not always like figuring out there's a right way and a wrong way. There's just the way you want to go. It's sort of a preference more. And so, but in terms of like a business plan, I don't believe you have to have, like an MBA degree. I had a friend who went down that path and I think it's helped her somewhat, but it's not mandatory either. I think it helps with some of the language around running a business. But for me, that was something I was really insecure about at the beginning. Like, oh, I have no experience in this field. But I knew, as I say, my why and my vision. And so I think then just through research and kind of pooling your own network, whether that's through parents or professors in college or teachers in high school, figuring out who you can talk to, and even, these online conferences or networking events, just kind of cultivating relationships with people that are doing things similar to what you want to do. So.
I think that's a really great perspective because you're never really alone in a situation unless you choose to be. So it's always great to reach out to other people, see what they think, maybe even do research on other things like you mentioned. All right, so our next question is, do you have plans to start other projects with Social Brew in the future?
Yes, I would say right now we're very focused on wholesale opportunities since the coffee market is very crowded, especially in the online space. And I'm not at a place as a startup right now to open my own coffee shop. So I'm thinking about Even there's these retrofitted bikes that you can, have like a coffee maker on the back and that kind of thing. So I've thought of doing things like that and getting the permits and being able to, have an in-person kind of presence somewhere or like a pop-up of some sort. But the goal is to work towards having my own shop one day and to employ survivors. But for now, it's just wholesale opportunities, and I've been really grateful to have had a couple of hotel partnerships. And so that was an area I was not expecting at all. But once I got into one, it was just kind of like, oh, let's see how far we can take this. And and I've talked to people at like Coachella and South by Southwest about maybe doing like cold brew cans and, them being in festivals and having a presence there. So lots of ideas always. I'm not sure which ones will, always pan out, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's really exciting. A lot of them sound really interesting. So I hope all of it goes out well for you.
Thank you.
So since the majority of our audience are high schoolers or just generally young people, someone wanted to know, how can high schoolers help in the fight against human trafficking?
Yeah, that was actually a question I just asked actually on my podcast. I just did, the episode hasn't come out yet, but there's an amazing couple who have an anti-trafficking nonprofit based in Cambodia. And so it was kind of a general question at the end I asked them, but it was along the same lines of like, where do people start? Because I think it's one thing to know about something, but then it's like, what do you do with that knowledge? And they kind of were just saying the biggest thing for them, they feel like, is like education and prevention. So they were saying that, and especially with being in high school now, like for me, when I was in high school, I think Instagram was just becoming a thing. But now it's just so much more, it's always advancing, and now we have AI and all of that. So I think there's a lot of ways that it can get really scary out there. So I think just learning how to protect yourself, educating, yourself and your friends about kind of healthy, practices on social media and being aware of like who you're talking to and all of that. So really just educating yourself. And I think also there's a lot of awareness events that various nonprofits have. So you can always volunteer your time in those ways, to help out. They always are looking for, interns and things like that, I know. So if you want to kind of work with the people that are on the front lines, there's always a way in that sense too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I really like that answer. I think a lot of high schoolers, myself included, think that we can't really do anything since we're like pretty young and we don't have much power. But since social media is such a big thing these days, we can always like spread awareness or educate other people, which definitely helps in the fight. Our next question is, do you have any advice for someone who wants to become an activist or pursue social change?
That's a great question. I would say, yeah, and it's very hard not to, because I struggle with this, as I say still, but you really have to believe in yourself, because I think there's going to be, I mean, I was told the same thing, kind of like, you're so young, and, and it's kind of like people just doubted whether or not I could do this. And as I say, I was thankful to have at least, my family and stuff and some friends in my corner to be like, no, championing me. So I think also finding those people in your life and making sure you have them, in your corner, because I think it's really easy to doubt yourself and to kind of not have confidence. And that I've seen like really stunt people's growth in terms of starting their own business. So I think, that's the business side. But yeah, on the activism side, as I say, I think when it's something you're passionate about, that shines through everything else. And so you, just not looking back, not focusing on the negative or the areas where you're like, I don't feel, like I know enough about this to do something. It's like, it is really a journey, and it's One of my favorite quotes is from this internship actually I did when I was in college at this place called Creative Vision. So they use film and art and media for, they call it creative activism. So it's combining, you know, art and social activism. That was their big thing. And there's an amazing story behind it. And everyone could look it up. It's Dan Eldon. And he had this quote. He said, "The journey is the destination." And I always loved that because I feel like it sounds very like, oh, you know, like pie in the sky, like kind of like, what does that mean? But I found that to be very true. It's like if you're chasing after, I need to get here and then I'll be okay, or I need to get here and then I'll be okay. You'll never really be content, and you can miss so much in that process and that journey. So I really just yeah, have that that self-awareness, cultivate that self-awareness of where you're at, and just be open to, you know, other people, other opportunities, be open to learning, and I don't think you can go wrong. So
Yeah, that's great advice no matter what you're pursuing. Like, trust yourself and make sure that whatever you're doing, you're passionate about it, and then that will always carry through to the end. Next, someone wanted to ask, how do you think your childhood impacted what you decided to do, like as a career?
yeah, definitely. Well, kind of going back to like in the presentation, I touched on it a little bit, but I think the way my parents raised my sister and I, was kind of, you know, we saw like every socioeconomic kind of class, you know, we had that exposure. So I would say I grew up pretty like, you know, middle upper class, you know. But we definitely also had hard times financially, like when I was in college, or when I was in high school, sorry, before college. And so I kind of experienced that personally, but also being able to do some sort of service work in Romania and India, and just, yeah, getting to know people of various backgrounds. I feel like that just kind of opened up, you know, my world to what I'm doing now. And as I say, that openness to being like, to not going in with an agenda too, I think is really important when you want to work with a certain population or a certain cause, not being like, well, I'm passionate, so this is what I want to do, you know, but going in to be like, who are the people, the key people that are doing this work, and what are they telling me that they need, and how could I maybe assist them? So it's more that partnership, collaborative approach, and I think that that has really served me well in what I'm doing today, because it's like I've had to more work on cultivating that personal confidence, as I say, as an entrepreneur, versus the whole collaboration and partnership element. Like I feel like I was kind of raised with that mindset. So.
Okay, so I think we have time for one more quick question. So, how do you deal with the stress of not finishing something before you go to sleep? Or how do you prevent anxiety from causing you to lose sleep?
Well, I'm not always the best at that, if we're being honest. I think I call it like change the channel, like in your head, you know, that's kind of what I try to tell myself. Like some people have different like mantras or sayings or like trigger sort of phrases in their head to try to like a mind shift, you know. But yeah, for me, sometimes it is like I'm not the best at it, but I know, because I know it's not great to watch TV at night in bed, but sometimes I will, you know, just turn on something funny that totally gets my mind off of, you know, whatever I was doing, or read something, you know. Even it sounds cheesy, but like there's those apps like the Calm app and stuff that have those like meditations, you know, just kind of anything to kind of get out of your head once you've been so focused, I think is really, really important. Because yeah, I've just found like sleep is so important to be able to do the work that you want to do and do it effectively. So, because you can't really give out of an empty cup, if that makes sense. So, like that only works for so long. So I think, honestly, it's a matter of kind of choice mentally, to say, okay, I know I still, this kills me. I want to keep going, but I need to put this down. I need to get some rest. And I'll be even more, kind of clear in the morning to be able to finish this task. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Simone, for a wonderful presentation and wonderful question and answers. I think what you said today can apply to a lot of different scenarios, not just for people who are perhaps looking to go down the same path as you. So thank you again. I hope you have a great rest of the day. And now we're going to move on to our raffle. So as always, please scan the QR code or type in the link. And we'll be back soon for our next presentation with Ahron Wayne and SQ Mah.
So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Welcome back, everyone, and hope you're all excited for the third presentation of the day. My name is Daniel Lee, and I will be your moderator for this event. Let's welcome our two speakers, Ahron Wayne and SQ. Ahron Wayne is an X-ray engineer who has an extensive background in biochemistry, biomedical imaging, and 3D printing materials research. He most recently gained internet fame for showing the world how to look inside a pack of Pokemon cards without opening it, using an X-ray CT scanner purchased on eBay. In the past, Ahron has conducted research in Israel, taught classes in China, and worked as a Python teacher at the Michigan Youth Empowerment Foundation. On the other hand, SQ is currently an AI engineer at Google, working on large language models. He has studied electrical engineering, computer science, and business administration at UC Berkeley. Additionally, SQ has been recognized as Hong Kong's Young Scientist and Mathematician of the Year, building AI solutions for some of Hong Kong's largest institutions like the train system. He also received second place and won $50,000 in the Vesuvius Challenge, where he was challenged to read ancient scrolls using AI. If you have any questions about the presentation, please type them in the YouTube chat or in the Q&A feature on Zoom. We'll have time for a Q&A session at the end, so make sure to stay until the end to enter our raffle. And without further ado, please welcome Ahron Wayne and SQ, who will be speaking on peeking inside stuff with AI and X-ray.
Hello. Can people hear me? Kind of just in an empty room right now. Okay. And SQ, are you there as well? Oh, I didn't hear you so good, but I heard something.
Okay. I gotta set up my audio.
I think SQ is the one presenting, so I'll thank him for that. I was going to talk first anyway, so while he's setting up his microphone, I'm happy to get started. But hello, everybody. I'm Ahron. This is SQ. We are friends from the Vesuvius Challenge, reading the ancient scrolls, and also about Pokemon cards. We also happen to be, we'll be living nearby, moving to where he's going to be in the Bay Area soon. So hopefully we'll have a friendship for the years to come. And we're going to be talking about peeking inside stuff with AI and X-ray, and it's kind of a hardware software sort of split. So next slide. Awesome. So here's SQ and here's me. And I'm on my unicycle on a US Navy tank, and I'm pointing it at my friend over there, who looks way more handsome in picture than I do. And next slide. So what we're going to do is, like I said, this is going to be kind of a two-part split. Is we're going to talk about X-rays themselves, how X-rays and then specifically 3D X-ray or X-ray CT works. And then SQ is going to move over to a different tab and then talk about AI and how AI kind of fits into all of this. So you've probably seen X-rays before. X-rays are just a form of light, like ultraviolet light or microwaves. They're a form of light, just higher energy light. And they go through stuff. And we use them to kind of differentiate or distinguish between things generally of different density. So at the airport, you put your suitcase in the security checker, and you can see whether there's, knives or guns or other things that they obviously don't want going through the airport. Or alternatively, for medical, that's another huge, the most common form you've probably seen X-rays. This is someone's finger, and we can see the soft flesh and then the bones, where the bones absorb more X-rays. And so there's contrast or a difference between the two different materials. And that's going to be very important for how X-rays work and why we need AI sometimes to get something useful out of X-rays. Slide. So, okay, why do we need X-rays? In addition to the less important things like keeping people safe and keeping people healthy, there's really important stuff like Pokemon cards. And then some genuinely important things like, well, ancient scrolls. And so, I'm sure that SQ will talk a little bit more, especially about the scrolls, but these are objects that basically humans don't want to open. And we either don't want to open them because their value would drop, and it would be really cool if we could look inside Pokemon cards without actually opening the pack, or because if we tried to open them, they'd get damaged. So these scrolls were in this ancient volcanic eruption. SQ, you got something?
Sorry.
Oh, no, I thought he was gonna tell us a little bit about the scrolls, but just these ancient scrolls were in this volcanic eruption 2,000 years ago, the same one that buried the town of Pompeii. And these scrolls, which have this ancient text, you can't open them without kind of destroying them because they're so brittle and crumbly, and you're not going to have a good time opening them. People tried and people did, but now we're kind of hoping that we can use X-rays to look inside without physically destroying these scrolls. Same thing with the Pokemon cards is, can we look inside without actually destroying the pack or damaging it? Next slide. So some things can be seen directly with X-rays. So like I said, X-rays, generally, we work based on contrast. So some things absorb more X-rays than others. And then we can use that to distinguish different materials. And so I actually have this as a Pokemon card, and it says Peek and Choose. And it's in front of an X-ray detector. And so the X-ray detector converts the X-rays into visible light. And then basically a camera takes a picture of that visible light, and we get what's like a photograph. And not seen in this image is an X-ray source that emits the X-rays kind of to the left. And this is all enclosed in a nice shielded lead box so the x-rays don't go out. But you can clearly see that there's just an image of the card. And if you look closely, you can even see maybe there's like a stripe at the top left. That's this, call this VMAX symbol. But you can see that some parts of the card have contrast and some don't. So that's good. We can directly see this card when it's just by itself. But the problem is that, for instance, with cards, is you don't just have that one special holographic card by itself. It's in a pack of cards. There might be 10, 11, 15 cards. And the problem is that those cards stack on top of each other and the image gets fuzzier and noisier. So on the left, these are actually X-ray images of just regular, non-special, non-holographic cards. And what happens is, you can see on the right, we have this holographic card. And as we add more and more non-holographic cards, the regular cards, the image gets fuzzier and blurrier, and it's like frosted glass. And you can imagine you'd have the same problem in the body where maybe you want to look at a specific bone, but there's a bunch of bones in front or a bunch of flesh or organs behind it. And all of the images kind of stack on top of each other. So a simple two-dimensional X-ray just isn't going to be good enough. So what do? We use 3D X-rays. And this is called computer-aided tomography or a CAT scan. And maybe you've gotten one of these before if you had an illness or a broken bone. But what happens is the X-ray source, and this GIF is very unreliable, but the X-ray source and the X-ray detector rotate around the object in the case of human CT scans. And we take thousands of X-ray images, not just one. And then using the information, this kind of a prior information about where the X-ray detector is, what angle the object is currently at, we can combine all of those X-ray images into a three-dimensional reconstruction, and we can virtually look through the sample layer by layer. Next slide. So, and this is kind of the fun part, is it turns out that some of these older machines, you can actually just go ahead and buy. Obviously you should know what you're doing, be safe, it's X-rays. But I had the chance a little bit over a year ago to just buy an old CAT scanner that was a surplus. When it was new, it was something like $500,000 20 years ago. And when I bought it last year, I got it for $1,500, local pickup only. There was a guy selling them out of his garage. His wife basically just wanted them out of the garage, so he gave me a very good deal. And I had to fix this thing, get it working, replace parts. But it was a lot of fun, very challenging. But in the end, I was able to get my own CAT scanner to be able to do experiments with. Next slide, please. So this is an example of a couple of small objects that could be scanned by this machine. This is a golf ball on the left. And you can see that clearly there's differences in density. So the outside part of the golf ball and the inside of the part of the golf ball have a different density. And you can kind of virtually distinguish the two layers. So if there's two things that have very different densities, that's easy to see the difference between. And again, that's going to be important. Same idea is on the right. We've got this Lego guy, and his arms and the rest of him have a different density. They're made out of different materials. And I speculate maybe this is because the arms have to fit into the shoulders and snap in place. So one is a different type of plastic. Slide. So the scans are all in black and white, but this is just kind of a fun scan that I made. This is not on my machine. It's a much bigger object. This is a pumpkin from Halloween. And we can kind of, again, you can virtually peel through the different layers. So we've got the seeds, we've got the envelope around the seeds, we've got the flesh, and you can create regions based on volume or density and virtually peel through and create this kind of, I think, this really cool animation. And I've got so many of these if you're interested. For instance, this one on the bottom left, this is a box of chocolates, kind of a bigger video, but I'm really proud of that. All right. And so now back to the Pokemon cards. Now we can see through the layers without opening the pack. So we've got a sports card, this Topps Gold card. We've got this Zacian VMAX. Actually, SQ sent me this card, so thank you very much from him. And we can see this kind of cross-sectional side view where you can see all the layers in this pack. And this is actually a kind of a synthetic pack I made up, but you can still see all the layers. And what we have to do is we actually virtually flatten onto the face of the card if there's a little bit of a bend to get this kind of nice looking picture. But still, this technique relies on the fact that the holographic has a different density. There's bright parts and there's dark parts. I think I have one more slide. So I just added these today, but actually I did this as a favor to a friend as he sent me some sealed packs. And these have been virtually flattened. And you can see the cards inside. These are old base set packs. And the one on the left, it's kind of a game of who's that Pokemon, but the one on the left is a Mewtwo. And the one on the right is actually a Venusaur. So there's the evolution symbol at kind of the top left of the card. And on the bottom right, you've got just enough of the Venusaur to know what card it is. All right, so this is awesome. I think this is cool. I applied for a patent for this. We'll see if that goes through. It's kind of the hottest topic around is being able to look inside packs. I did it for fun and for the science, but you know, there's going to be lots of consequences. It'll be very interesting. And so the question we have is, next slide. Well, so what do we need 3D for? And that's what my friend SQ is going to talk about now. We have
Thanks,
3D.
Aaron.
What do we need AI for? Yep.
Is my audio working now?
It is working.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Aaron, for explaining X-rays. And, you know, Aaron's work is really what allows us to use AI to even further discover more of the secrets inside packs or inside scrolls. So Aaron earlier mentioned that we have CAT scanning technology, right? So we can look into an object, we can get a 3D scan of the object. So inside the pack, you know, we can see each individual card. And actually, if you remember earlier, in the earlier slides, the scroll, it's this like darkened, burnt, crispy roll. And actually, when we use a CAT scan, similar technology, and we look inside the scroll, this is what we see. So you can see like I'm going through the scroll and we can see it's quite messy, like the papers are all like frayed, but we can actually start to begin to see like each individual layer, just in the same way that we can see each individual layer of packs. But I don't know about you, but if you ask me, do I read any text off of these images, I can't see anything. Maybe you guys have better eyesight than me. I'm getting a little old. But you know, it's not possible to read at the moment. Another thing that I found very interesting was when I first saw these scrolls, I'm like, well, it looks like my carpet at home. And I'm pretty sure my carpet at home doesn't have any ancient text on it. But we'll see. Maybe we can use AI to try to actually read the text that's on these scrolls. So what can we do? All right, we have these scrolls. We have things that look like carpets. What's the next step? Well, when we read like a piece of paper, we don't read a piece of paper, like we read it head on, right? And I see my background's messing up. We read the paper head on, but what we have is a side view of the piece of paper. So we need first map it to 2D. So we take the side view, kind of like we take the side view of the cards, or we take the side view of the scroll, and we flatten it out so that we can actually see the head-on face where you can start seeing the text on it. But on the left, so we actually have a head-on view of the Pokemon card with a bunch of cards in front of it. And in this case, all the other cards in front of it are making it super blurry and making it very difficult to see what the Pokemon is. And on the right is also a flattened. So we take one of those messy kind of like layers and we flatten it out. That's actually what we see. So we can begin to see the fibers of the paper, but we still don't see any text on it, right? And we think that there's some text on it. Just as a Pokemon card, we think there's a Pokemon in it. So this is where AI really begins to come in, because you can imagine like AI is a little bit like a really silly, dumb baby that you have to teach how to recognize patterns. So imagine like if you have like a younger sibling or something, when they're very, very young, they don't know like what a car is or what a bus is or what a train is, right? So maybe you or your parents would have to point at a train and say, that's a train. And you have to point at a bus and that's a bus. And so AI kind of works in the same way, where we have to say like, okay, this is something we care about. Please recognize this thing. So if we look back at the paper here, or the flattened out paper there, someone actually spent a lot of time to look through the paper and they found something that maybe looks like ink. So here's like a really close up of one of the pieces of kind of paper that folks looked at in the scroll. And they said, okay, there's this interesting pattern. But for human beings to find this pattern is pretty challenging, because if you have a lot of data, you have a lot of buses and trains you have to look at, and you just have to find this like one type of pattern, it's really difficult. But AI actually works pretty well with pattern recognition. So what happened was someone looked through this, then we're able to say, okay, this region, this like area that's red, this is a pattern we want you, the AI model, to recognize. So this might be like, imagine this is a train, for example, or a bus, just essentially some pattern we want you to recognize. Now, if we take that pattern and a model has learned to start recognizing that pattern, this is what happens. So we turn like essentially this piece of paper where we don't see anything, and we actually tell the model, hey, recognize this pattern and find all the patterns that look similar to this pattern on this piece of paper. And we're starting to see, bits that look like text. And in the same way, like for Pokemon cards, you can kind of think like, if you see this dark patch in the background here, this is a Machamp. So if you see this dark patch, you can also in the same way, like draw a red outline around this Machamp and say, hey, this is the pattern I want you to recognize. So I'll run through a little bit of the model architecture. I know some folks in the audience might be really curious how the AI model works. So there's actually a 3D component and 2D component to it, because the output, so the text itself, the output is 2D, but the input is 3D, like a 3D CAT scan or a 3D stack of images. So it actually takes, firstly, there's a 3D part to it. The first part takes a 3D input. It's actually very similar to kind of models that we use to determine like what is in this image is like, what is a kidney, what is these are like different organs. So it'll take like these images of organs and try to find out where the organs are. But in a similar idea, you can take like a 3D stack of Pokemon cards or a 3D image of a scroll and say, look, instead of finding out where the kidney is or where these organs are, find out where the ink is, right? So it takes the 3D input and finds out where the ink is. And then, well, humans aren't good with 3D ink. So if you take like, we can look at these organs and we say, okay, these look like organs. But for like a Pokemon card or for ink in a scroll, it's much harder for us to read if it's in 3D. So there's a second part that takes this 3D input, it flattens this 3D input and actually outputs something that's 2D. So it's actually using a similar model architecture as one that I use in like full self-driving today. Like Tesla would use something like that, or Waymo. But essentially it like find in this example, it's finding where the people are, where the streets are. And you can imagine like, instead of like this tree, it's just like be like, okay, here's the ink. So we take this like 3D ink, we flatten it, and then this 2D model would output where the 2D ink is. And then we can finally read it. So using this architecture, what are some of the results? So you remember the very first image back there, there's not much text. Right? But if we take this, we use this text that the model has found, and we label that, and we feed it back into the model. So the model kind of learns from itself. After doing that 3 times, this is what we start to see. So we see now there's a lot more text, right? We can see maybe like this is ancient Greek. So this is maybe something, this is an alpha, it kind of looks like an A, right? We have a tau, it's like a T. But we can draw the same red boxes around this T, let's say, and we put it back into the model. The model now has more data to learn from. Now, after we do that 6 times, this is what it looks like. And then finally, we do it 11 times. This is what it looks like. So every time we feed more data back into the model, it learns more and more, kind of like your younger sibling. You show them more and more buses, show them more and more trains. and they're not going to confuse trains for buses and buses for trains, right? So this is exactly how it works. Now, this is the whole scroll, or a good amount of one scroll. And now we can see how far we've gotten. Right? We've gone from maybe we see like one tiny letter to now 400, 600 letters or so. And what we found out is that I can't read ancient Greek, but if you take this ancient Greek and we give it to an ancient Greek expert, what they can tell us is that it's actually a philosophical text from a philosopher named Philodemus, who apparently was very good friends with the uncle of Julius Caesar, which is another fun tidbit. But this is a philosophical text about Epicureanism, which is really about like enjoying life. And what's really amazing about this is, firstly, we don't have very many like Epicurean texts at all that survive to this day. And another awesome thing is that no one has read this scroll in over 2,000 years. And by using X-rays and by using AI, you can be the first person to read something in thousands of years. And this is really like very new technology. It's only been possible in the past maybe 10, 20 years. So it's really awesome that we're living in this time. So what are some of the results? I mean, we saw the scroll. I won $50,000 to actually to read the scroll. And also Ahron has been working a lot on the scrolls too. So he took his CT scanning machine and he made his own scrolls. He put it through like an oven, and then he made his own scrolls to see that if we can simulate some of the behavior of the scrolls that were dug up in Pompeii. So that was amazing. We got a lot of extra data from that as well. So yeah, just if you want to learn more about AI, I actually work on something called AI blocks, and essentially, I'm trying to make AI super easy to learn. Like I wish someone taught me AI earlier, so I built something where we don't need any math or CS to learn AI. And feel free to shoot me an email. Normally, you need a paid account, but I'm happy to do free accounts for you all here in the audience. So just shoot me an email at hello@aiblocks.org. And also, Ahron has gotten, please like and subscribe to Ahron's channel. It's Ahron Wayne's Strange Brain. And the title of the video is, his biggest video is about 100,000 plus views now, digitally peeking inside packs of Pokemon cards. And he'll talk a lot more about how you can actually use X-rays to look into Pokemon cards as well.
Thank you. Thanks, SQ. I didn't know you had, is that your startup, AI Blocks, or you just work on that?
Yeah, it's a startup. I work with schools across Southeast Asia. We've done stuff in the Philippines, in Vietnam, in Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore.
That's so cool.
Yeah, but very passionate about trying to teach AI and make it more accessible. So I think, yeah, feel free to check that out. And with that, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time, and we're open to any questions.
Yay!
So much. Thank you so much for that amazing presentation. It was really interesting to learn about X-rays and AI and how they can be used. Now, like you said, I think it is time for us to move on to the Q&A. So the first question is, with the 3D X-ray, how did you go from the 2D scroll spirals to the overall 3D structure?
You want to take this one, Ahron?
Oh, so I think maybe there's a little bit of confusion. So if we go back to the picture over here, this is just one slice. So humans can't comprehend 3D all at once. So this is actually a GIF where we're looking through this whole scroll, and it's slice by slice by slice by slice. So there's actually thousands and thousands of 2D images that are on top of each other. So there's actually a 3D reconstructed data set, but we can only personally look at it one slice at a time. So that's what we're seeing, is just one slice of this 3D data set.
Yeah. Imagine if you're slicing a tomato, you make a cut on the tomato, and then you take a picture, and then you make another cut on the tomato, you take a picture. So if you take a lot of pictures of you cutting through the tomato, eventually you actually get a kind of a 3D image of the inside of the tomato. And that's exactly what's happening. We're just making chops and then stacking them together. Yeah.
Thank you so much for answering that question. The next question is, where can we find more details about how the AI model works?
I'll take this one. So there's more details. I would say definitely start with papers. Like, so if you want to look at exactly like these specific models, the paper that would kind of go through how this model works is the UNetter++ model. That's the kind of the 3D model, and then the 2D model is called a segformer. So if you search those up on Google today, you'd get some papers. And I would say like they're pretty technical, but I learned AI a couple years back, and initially the papers were very, very daunting and it was very difficult to understand. But just like reading through, I think like reading through the paper, spending time with them, reading other resources that are there online, you just begin to start understanding them. Another good resource I recommend, other than like the papers themselves and also AI blocks, we do describe like high level how some of these models work. Another great one is a book by Francois Chollet. How do you spell his name? Francois, and then just Francois, and then search like Keras, Keras. He talks about like on a like simple level how like AI models work, and then after understanding a little bit of how AI models work, that was my first book I read. You can get into these more complex models as well.
So the next question also asks about the AI model. This person asked, how can you tell if the text in the AI model, the AI model sees is correct?
That's a fantastic question. And the answer is we don't really know because I don't read ancient Greek. So if you read ancient Greek, you can kind of understand, like you can know that the text is correct because it needs to make sense. So for example, we look at this final output. How the model actually works, it only looks at a small part of the scroll at a time. So maybe like we see all this text all in one go, but the model would only see maybe like one corner of the text at a time. So that actually helps because we know that the model is not memorizing how Greek words look like. If it only sees like the top left corner of a Greek letter, and it thinks that there's ink there, it's not thinking that there's an ink in the shape of like a Greek letter, it's thinking that there's just ink there. So if we give it enough like small little parts of the scroll, and it thinks there's ink here, it doesn't think there's ink here, and if all these parts where it like thinks there's ink and thinks there's no ink come together in a way that looks like Greek letters, we know that it's probably correct because the model doesn't actually know what a Greek letter looks like. But even when it doesn't know what a Greek letter looks like, when it comes together, there's still something that looks like a Greek letter. And then finally, when you take all these Greek letters, you give it to an expert, they can actually understand what it's saying, then we further can confirm that this actually makes sense and the model's not making stuff up.
Wasn't that actually a restriction in the competition SQ? Like you couldn't have your input be so large or your output be too large?
Precisely, that's right. So one way they tried to prevent people from like making up Greek letters was they would, exactly as Ahron said, you would give them only small parts of the letter at a time. And you basically, the competition, they didn't allow you to give an input that was the size of it, any larger, equal to or larger than the size of like maybe a quarter of a Greek letter, so that the model wouldn't just memorize what Greek letters look like. But that's a fantastic question.
And that's something actually, so we've worked on AI for the Pokemon cards problem, and that's something that happens is if you have a large enough input, is the model will actually memorize kind of the general shapes of what Pokemon cards look like. And they don't just denoise, they also denoise and are kind of biased towards making shapes that look like the Pokemon.
That's right.
So another question asks, could we use the AI model to learn an ancient language that we don't quite understand right now?
That's a good question. I think, so I can't come up, like in my mind, I can't come up with examples where like there's a language where we've completely not known and then the AI model has like translated it for us. But what AI models are really powerful doing is that from like a small amount of data, it can learn a lot of stuff. So if we have, for example, I think there's some like Native American languages that are, we have very little data for, but because like models have learned other Native American languages and they've learned like the few translations of like this Native American word to this other English word, it's able to translate a lot more of that Native American language than we were previously able to, because we don't have many speakers of that language. So we need to give it a little bit of like what the correct translations are, but then it's able to pick out a lot of other stuff from there. I can't think of an example where it's like learn the language entirely.
And a bit more of a broader question, but someone asks, in what other applications can this technology be used?
Ahron, you want to go with the X-ray, and I can add on to the AI part?
I mean, X-ray. So my job for several years, I just taking on a new job, but my job for several years was kind of industrial inspection as a service. So here's a pumpkin, but you can imagine, oh, what if you're a maker of, and this is really exciting, bottle caps, which happened to be about 30% of my job was inspecting bottle caps. Because if you imagine you are a certain very large manufacturer of soft drinks, and you're going to make a mold that makes 1 billion bottle caps, you don't want 5 years down the line for them to leak. So you actually use X-ray CT to inspect the cap when it's sealed, and you can see if the threads are engaged or if the enclosure is pressed down properly and it's creating a good seal. Other things that you might inspect are engine parts. You'll see if there's pores. You can see if valves would leak. You can see, actually, I once scanned an ancient bassoon, like the musical instrument. They were trying to create a 3D replica of it. I've scanned ancient vases. I've scanned aerospace parts. CT scanning has lots of uses other than medical, and even other than Pokemon cards and ancient scrolls. So that's the X-ray side.
Totally. And once we have this data, then we can apply AI to it. But in terms of like, X-ray is one way that we can image something, right? X-ray ultimately is one way we can image. It's like a type of light, but we can imagine we can image a lot of different things. We can image like when we take a photo on our camera, it's imaging. It's just not using X-ray. It's using like visible light. So we can image a lot of things, and we can do a lot of things with those images, right? I mentioned earlier, if we look at like the AI architecture for segmentation. So segmentation is essentially like finding where something is in an image. Well, we can use this for self-driving vehicles, right? Because we need to know where the humans are. We need to know where like motorcyclists and bikes are. We can imagine also this would be useful for like in environmental situations. So there's one really cool project where they're trying to count the number of fish in the river, and just to make sure that fish populations aren't dropping. But essentially anywhere where like you need a human being to like look at a camera, you'd be able to use this technology instead of like having someone to just manually count everything. So it's great for production lines. It's also great for let me think. There's another example. Like surveillance, for example, like safety. So making sure, like one project I worked on was actually, we want to see if like people would cross onto train tracks, and we want to like prevent people from doing that. So that's the kind of the segmentation side. If we look at the 3D kind of input side, we can also do a lot of stuff where like, I brought up the case where we're trying to look at organs, and this is actually pretty helpful because imagine, there's a lot of patients today, but we don't have enough doctors for the amount of patients. And so to get an expert to actually look at every single like 3D image, like we have radiologists look at like images of bones or images of organs to see if there are any problems. Firstly, like doctors, there's not enough doctors, and sometimes doctors get tired and they make mistakes. So the AI models are there to firstly like help reduce the load on doctors, like because we can now do this automatically. We can like find the different organs, we can like figure out if there are any problems with them, but also we can actually add it as an additional check. So if the doctor makes a mistake, the model can actually, based on these 3D images, determine like if there really is an issue, like if there's a broken bone or if there's like an organ that's like malformed. These are all things that like AI can help automate. where previously only doctors were able to do.
And kind of building off of healthcare and whatnot, someone asks, can this X-ray AI technology be used in treating diseases or finding treatments?
Mm.
So I can start. I can start with that. So there's the general, can X-ray be used? Absolutely. That's what general CAT scans are for. And can AI be used? Absolutely as well. You've got all this data, and you can train a model to make some kind of conclusion about what kind of disease the patient has or the stage of it. But there's one that's specifically a combination that I think is interesting called digital subtraction angiography. And this is a technique used to visualize, I believe, blood vessels. And what you do is you take an X-ray image of the patient before you add contrast. So you actually get injected with something that fills the blood vessels. And then you take another image after you've added contrast. And then you can subtract these two images and get an image of just the vessels. All right. And there's kind of an emerging technique where they've actually trained AI models to take images of the before and after, such that they actually don't need a before or they don't need contrast. And then they could take one image and get the kind of the results of this two-step process. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, totally. That's a great example of how AI is used in medicine. And I mean, kind of adding on to that a little bit, if we think about like just labeling, okay, this is ink, we can imagine like we can label like this is cancer, right? We can look at this image, we can like draw a red box around this is cancer, and models can actually help like detect where cancers are, sometimes with better accuracy than human beings too. So that's on the diagnostic side. There's also like AI models that are just like creating their own medicines. So like AlphaFold and like similar works, they're predicting like protein structures. They're predicting like what are some great medical molecules. Those are also examples of like where AI is used beyond imaging, that in medicine beyond imaging. Yeah.
You don't get to interact with any of the AlphaFold guys, do you, at your workplace, SQ?
I do.
Okay.
It's fun.
That's
yeah,
cool.
I have a friend on the reinforcement learning team, so he does a lot of AlphaFold stuff.
Very cool.
You should meet him. He's nice.
Yeah, okay. I mean, AlphaFold, for anybody who doesn't know, was this model that basically blew everything. I actually did a little work on this this thing called molecular dynamics. So how proteins fold. And it's a really, really, really complicated problem because you've got a sequence of amino acids, and then it ends up folding to this super complicated structure that interacts with other proteins or drugs. And it's really important, the idea to be able to predict that. And then the AlphaFold that, Google, where SQ works, produced just kind of blew every other technique totally out of the water. And it's pretty amazing. So.
And I think we have time for one final question. Someone asks, is it bad to have too large of a starting data set?
I think not. So I would say like, so long as the data quality is good. So if you have like, let's take this example with organs. So we have a lot of images of organs and a lot of like 3D like representations of those organs. It doesn't really hurt that we have a lot of those. I think what it hurts is like when the data quality is bad. So let's say there's mistakes, like in this large data set, maybe there are like hidden mistakes that, because humans would be the ones creating these 3D like 3D representations of the organs to begin with. Sometimes humans make mistakes. So you can imagine if you have a very large data set, you can have a lot of like hidden mistakes. And in a large data set, it's hard for like, let's say if there's like only two of you who are like training a model, like me and Ahron, then we can't see all the mistakes that are there. Whereas maybe with a smaller data set, we know that the mistakes are there. It's easier to find the mistakes. But generally, putting the mistakes aside and making sure that the large data set has like all the different scenarios that you want, like for example, in this case, there's all the different organs you want. It's never really a bad thing other than the mistake part. Sometimes large data sets also take up a lot of storage. But I mean, the very worst case is you can just filter, like in the Vesuvius, the scroll challenge, the whole data set, I want to say, was like 8 terabytes, something like that. It was crazy. So it's really hard to train a model on 8 terabytes because it's a lot of data. But what you can always do is you can take this big data set, you can make it smaller by throwing away, a good amount of it, and you can still kind of train a smaller model on that smaller data set. So generally, it's great to have big data sets.
There is one question that I was just hoping to answer real quick, and that's on are X-rays ever able to damage like kind of fragile artifacts? And this is a question that people kind of overlook. Some people think that it's really damaging. Some people don't even think about it. And the answer is maybe and sometimes. So there was an example actually with the Vesuvius Challenge reading these scrolls where it was kind of an awkward moment for the people. They brought them to a very powerful X-ray source, the scrolls, way more powerful than my machine, thousands and thousands of times more powerful. And they had it encased in I believe there was one where there was like an acrylic plastic case, maybe a different kind of plastic. And it was an awkward moment when they took it out of the machine and the plastic had actually changed color. So the answer is yes, absolutely. X-rays interact with matter. That's why, X-rays and other ionizing radiation can cause damage. Just like ultraviolet light could discolor plastics or damage them, X-rays can too. It's a dose-dependent relationship, and it depends on the material. But in theory, absolutely.
All right. With that, I think that concludes our third presentation. Thank you so much for such an amazing presentation.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Aaron and SQ, for that insightful presentation about the intersection of X-rays and AI. So now, without further ado, let's invite our final speaker, Mr. Joshua Posthuma. Joshua is an international chess master, 4-time Michigan State chess champion, and professional chess coach from Farmington Hills, Michigan. He earned the National Master title in Chicago at age 15, the FIDE Master title by scoring 9 out of 9 in the 2018 Michigan Invitational at age 18, and the International Master title at the 2022 St. Louis Norm Congress at age 22. Since graduating high school in 2018, Joshua has been a full-time chess coach. In the past few years, he has grown into one of the biggest chess coaches in the state of Michigan. Many of his students have made it into the US top 50 for their age, with 2 even reaching national master. His strategic thinking has brought him success both on and off the chessboard. When he's not playing chess, you'll find him playing other board games or out on the disc golf course. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please type them in the YouTube chat or in the Q&A feature on Zoom. We'll have time for a Q&A session at the end, and make sure to stay to enter the raffle. And now, without further ado, please welcome Joshua Posthuma, who will be speaking on Mastering Your Passion, Lessons from Chess.
All right. Thank you very much, Ryan, for that introduction. Let me get my screen share going here. Cool. just like this. Okay. Yeah, thank you everybody for coming to watch and listen to my presentation today. I really hope that you will get some value out of it and learn some things that will help you in life and with whatever your future careers may be. So first of all, a little bit about myself. My name is Joshua Posthuma. I grew up in Holland, Michigan, and chess has really been my whole life. I got started playing chess when I was 5 years old, and it was really an accident. I was bored one day as a little kid, and I wandered into my parents' game closet and pulled out this game that looked interesting to me. I asked my dad, "What is this?" And he was like, "Oh, that's chess. Are you sure you're ready to learn that?" And my dad didn't even know how to play at the time. But I was like, "Yeah, teach me. I want to learn. This looks cool." And long story short, my dad learned the rules so that he could teach them to me. And very quickly, I was able to actually beat my dad and beat both of my parents. It only took a week or two. And that's when my parents realized I had a lot of talent for the game. And actually, 3 weeks after learning how the pieces moved, I entered a scholastic tournament and got a third place trophy. And really, I've been competing in chess tournaments ever since. So I became a national master at age 15 while I was in high school. And after graduating high school, I became a full-time chess coach while continuing to try to improve my own chess abilities. And so at age 21, I became an international master. That is the title I have today at age 24. And I am currently in pursuit of the highest title in chess, which is the Grandmaster title. In fact, I'm in Budapest, Hungary right now playing a series of tournaments that could help me earn the Grandmaster title. So that's a little bit about my story, my history. And so this presentation, we're really going to break it into three main sections. The first thing I want to talk about with all of you is how to get really good at something. Obviously, in my case, that was chess, but for all of you, it could be really anything else. That's something you have to figure out. Part two is going to be figuring out how to monetize it. And I had to figure out how can I turn chess, this passion of mine, into a career. And part three is just going to be various life lessons that I've learned from chess along the way. So let's get into it. Part one, getting really good at something. And my first piece of advice to all of you would be to start now. Okay. Now, I was very fortunate that I got such an early start in chess. In fact, most players who do become like international chess masters or grandmasters, they do get quite a young start, usually starting before the age of 10. And so the earlier you can get started investing in your passion, the better. But you're not a lost cause if you didn't start when you were 5 like I did, okay? But you should start as soon as possible. Don't think like a lot of people think. A lot of people think, oh, I'm going to wait until I get to college. And in college, that's where I'm going to figure out what I want to do. No, 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 no. You should be very intentional about trying to figure out what your passion is before you go to college. Right now, be trying to figure out what do you want to be investing your time into. All right. So another important thing to understand if you want to get really good at something is it's very important for you to apply your knowledge. Application is more valuable than theory. All right. So on the right-hand side here, you can see this pyramid, and it shows like all the different ways that you can learn information and the different rates at which you'll retain that information. So if you just listen to a lecture, you're only going to retain about 5% of what you hear in a lecture. That's one of actually the worst ways to learn something. But if we, go all the way down here, we can see the second best way to retain your knowledge is to actually do the thing. Practice by doing. And so when it comes to chess, right? The best thing that you can do to get good at chess is actually to play games of chess. I know that sounds really obvious, but to a lot of people, it's not. I get questions all the time. What should I do if I want to get better at chess? Should I read 35 books? Should I watch all these videos? Should I memorize 40 lines of opening theory? Okay, all those things could be useful, but the number one thing that you should be doing is playing games, okay? You need to actually practice doing the thing that you're trying to get good at, not just learning more about it. In fact, the best way for you to learn is going to be by doing it. Okay, so whatever it is that you want to get really good at, dare to step outside the realm of just learning from a distance and try to get hands-on in doing it yourself. That can be scary. That can be very scary because it means really putting your knowledge to the test and kind of putting your ego on the line in a sense. And you have to ask yourself, do I really have what it takes to do this? So putting that theory, applying that theory can be scary, but don't shy away from it. That is very important. So let's move on. Actually, we can see here at the bottom of this pyramid, there is one way of learning that you'll retain your knowledge even better than doing the thing, and that's by teaching it to others. And so one big piece of advice I have is if you want to get really good at something, teach what you know to somebody else. And one of my favorite quotes here is to teach is to learn twice, because not only do you need to learn the thing the first time around, but you need to really learn it a whole second time in order to be able to explain it to somebody else. You need to really understand it at a deeper level. You're going to get all sorts of questions like, why is this good or why is this bad? And you need to be able to really explain and really understand it at a deeper level. So teaching forces you to really understand what it is that you're doing. And so at age 12, at the advice of my chess coach that I had at the time, I started coaching. I was still just a young kid myself, but I began to coach others. Just started, with a few lessons a week at my local library or at a local game store. When I was 14, 15, even before I could drive, I would be biking to my local game store after school to teach lessons. And I wasn't making much money doing that at the time, but I was gaining valuable teaching experience that helped me later in my career. And I was also, whether I realized it at the time or not, I was actually helping my own game as well. In addition to those lessons that I did as a kid, I also volunteered at my local chess club. Every Saturday, I would go in and teach the advanced group of kids, even when I was still essentially a kid myself. And again, it was a great benefit to them, but also a great benefit to myself. So teaching others, very valuable. Okay. And now this kind of goes without saying, but if you want to get really good at something, you need to put in the hours. It does take a lot of time, consistent, intentional effort to get really good at something. Some of you may have heard before about this 10,000 hour rule, that it takes about 10,000 hours to master any craft. Now, of course, that's just like a arbitrary number and it could be more or less, but I think it's, reasonably close to correct. On the right-hand side here, if we look at this picture, it's actually a compilation of a couple screenshots from different online chess accounts that I have. We can see in this first one, it says I've played 47,917 games. Now, that's just on my main account on this website called Lichess. On a few other accounts, I have 5,000 games, 3,000 games. Another website, I have 8,000 games. So if we add that all together, plus the games that I've played in real life, we get a number north of 100,000 games that I've played throughout my lifetime. That is a lot of chess, right? But that's really what it takes to get to the highest levels. Now, a few pieces of advice I have regarding this long journey, because it is a lot of work and it takes a long time to put in this many hours. So one thing I would say is don't do it alone. All right, I've been very fortunate throughout my time as a chess player to have friends by my side pretty much every step of the way. I've always had friends who were around the same level as me, where we could play against each other, we could study together, go through books together, go to tournaments together. And it was not only a lot of fun that way, but we held each other accountable. We kind of helped each other improve and just made the journey a lot more fun and easier for everyone. And so if you're trying to get really good at something, get a friend group or at least one other friend or just someone that you can work together with. Don't do that long, difficult journey alone. And another thing, you need to be willing to put in the work even when you don't feel like it. All right. I love chess, but I don't always feel like playing chess. All right. There are many times that I would much rather do something else. And I do make time for fun and I do make time to relax, of course. But if I just did the easier thing, if I just relaxed all the time, I wouldn't be where I am today. So you need to be willing to put in the work, even if you'd rather feel like doing something else. You need to have that discipline. And lastly, you need to be willing to criticize yourself. So with pretty much every single chess game that I play, win or lose, I don't just move on to the next game right away. I analyze the game that I just played with the computer. If you don't know, chess engines, chess computers, they are much stronger than any human. And so obviously you can't use one during the game, that's cheating, but they are a fantastic tool for analyzing your games after the fact because it can point out every single little mistake that you made and it can tell you what you should have played instead. And that knowledge is just incredibly helpful for chess improvement. So yeah, make use of tools like that that can help point out to you where you're making mistakes and what you could be doing better. Okay. And then one other piece of advice I have, if you want to get really good at something, you need to specialize. You need to pick that thing. All right. There are, broadly speaking, two types of people. You have specialists and generalists, and they're both good. I'm not saying that one person that's wired one way is better than another. That's not the case. But you have generalists who are pretty good at a lot of different things. And then you have specialists who are just like really good and really focus in on one thing and maybe aren't so great at other things. And again, they're both very valuable, but the tendency in the job market is to value specialists a little bit more. And so from a monetary standpoint, if you can specialize in one particular area, you are going to be more valuable in the job market. That's just how our society works. So it can be very useful to specialize in a certain area. Okay. So let's get to part two. Now you kind of know what it takes to get really good at something. And so I also want to talk about how to monetize it. And that's something that I had to figure out around when I was in high school. I knew, all right, I've got this thing I'm really good at. I love chess. I'm good at chess. I would love to make a career out of it. How can I make that happen? And so one question you do need to ask yourself is should I be an employee of somebody else's company or an entrepreneur? Should I start my own thing? And my dream was pretty much always to be an entrepreneur. Sounded a lot more fun to me, but I will say I think it's wise in most cases to start out as an employee. All right, if your passion is something that you can get a job as an employee in. And I say that because it's important to get the experience first before you launch your own thing. So I guess don't rush into starting your own thing if you don't have the experience for it to be successful. It can be wise to get a few years under your belt working at another company, really learning all you can, and then start your own business when you are better suited to do that. And also say being self-employed and running your own business, it's not for everyone. There's a lot of accountability. Really, all the accountability falls on you. All right. If you make money, that's congratulations. You did that. If you don't make money, that's your fault. Right. All the accountability is on you. So it's a little riskier, but it can also be more rewarding and more freeing in a lot of ways. So, yeah, moving on here. I'm tackling a lot of different topics just because I know I have a limited amount of time to talk to all of you. And so I'm trying to really hit at the points that I think are going to be most important or most helpful to all of you. So a big decision that I had to make in my life, and a lot of you are going to be having to make as well, is college worth it? And I'd say it really depends on what you're trying to pursue, what your
Okay, so it looks like Joshua might be having some connection issues in his hotel in Budapest, so gonna wait a few minutes for him to get back online.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, you're fine, you're fine.
I think I cut out for just a couple seconds there. Yeah, it's the Budapest internet. But okay, hopefully that does not happen again. Sorry about that, everybody. All right, well, I'll pick up where I left off. We were talking about college and if it makes sense. For me, I ultimately decided that it didn't really make sense. I even talked well, let me back up a step. So in my junior year of high school, I went to a few different colleges around the United States that potentially could offer me chess scholarships because there are competitive chess teams, just like there are competitive football teams or basketball teams. And I did get offered a few scholarships from some different colleges to compete on their chess teams. But they were not full ride scholarships. They were maybe half ride scholarships thereabout. And so it still just didn't make sense to me in a few different ways monetarily. There have been studies that have shown that, people are on average taking 17 years to pay off their student loan debt. And so it is something that is going to probably be with you for a long time. And I'm not saying that to scare all of you away from going to college, because college can absolutely be a good idea. If it will help you pursue your passion, if it'll give you essential knowledge that you couldn't find elsewhere, and if the job that you're going to get at the end of it all is, paying enough to make it worth it, right? It absolutely can still be worth it, but I just understand the cost, right? Not just the monetary cost, but also the cost in time. It's at least 4 years you'd be spending to get a degree. And something I thought about is like, where else could I be in that 4 years, right? Well, a lot of my schoolmates were heading off to college, and I started my chess business. And so in a sense, I got 4 years ahead of them in my career by getting started right out of high school. So again, I would say for probably most people, probably the majority of people, college is still a good idea. I'm not trying to say don't go to college, but only go if it makes sense, right? Only go if it makes sense for you and if it's going to be a net positive for your career. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to breeze through some of these other points pretty quickly. So I would say there are three main categories of how you can monetize your passion. And you can make money by doing your passion. In chess, that looks like getting paid to play, getting paid by winning tournaments. Now, not a lot of people make a living from just competing in chess. I'd say only the top 50 or top 100 players in the world can really make a living just from playing. It's very tough to do that. And so this second category of how you can monetize your passion is actually much more realistic for most people, and that's by teaching your passion. And that's what I do. I make some income from tournament winnings, but the vast majority of my income is from teaching other people. And there's a third category that's become increasingly common in recent years, and that's entertaining with your passion. And that can look like being a YouTuber or a streamer, or just having some social media where you're not necessarily teaching other people, but you are influencing other people, providing entertainment for them. And there are lots of ways to monetize that through ad revenue and sponsorships, if you can build up a big enough following, which can take time. But those are, I would say, the three main ways that you can monetize pretty much any passion. This is not just applying to chess. And so think about how you could apply any one of these three things to whatever it is that you like to do. Okay. I also had to figure out what my target audience was going to be. And that's what any good business needs to do. For me, my target audience is actually children for teaching. My students are almost exclusively kids, elementary, middle school, some high school. But I work with almost no adults. And one thing that I have learned over the years is parents are much more willing to spend money on their kids and investing in their kids' futures rather than spending money on themselves. And so working with kids for me has been a much more lucrative and reliable income. Okay. Real quick here, I'll just say, as far as advertising goes and getting the word out about your business, word of mouth is the best form of advertising you'll get. Most of my students have come from parents talking to other parents, being like, hey, my kid's been working with Coach Josh and he's been doing really well. You should reach out to Coach Josh as well, right? And people like really tend to trust when they get, when a review from someone they know, a friend, a family. And so word of mouth is really the best advertising that you can get. But of course, for that to work, you need to do a good job. People need to have good things to say about you and your service. And one other thing that can help with advertising that is mostly free is participating in community events. So for me, I go to local chess clubs fairly often, and I go to local chess tournaments fairly often, even if there's really no competition for me there, but just to socialize with other people in the community and just to be out there and be seen in a lot of ways. And without fail, when I go to a local tournament or chess club, at least one person will come up to me inquiring about chess lessons. And so that's probably the second best way that I've been able to acquire students, is just by being out there in the community at these local events where people can know that I exist and be able to approach me. So, all right, lastly, on the topic of monetizing your skill, you should always be looking to grow. You should always be looking for personal development opportunities and business growth opportunities. Don't settle for where you're at. Of course, it's always good to be content with what you have and happy with where you're at, but always be looking for opportunities to grow. You really can't afford to be a lazy entrepreneur, and you need a plan for the future. So for me, as a chess coach, there's really a limited number of hours that I'm able to teach in the day when I'm working with mostly kids because, kids are in school most of the day. So I really have between, let's say, 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. And so I reached a point where my schedule was maxed out. I had no more room for any more students. And I had to ask myself the question, well, what now? Do I just stay doing exactly what I'm doing? Or do I try to innovate and try to grow? And so my idea was, instead of having all these one-on-one lessons, to start running some group lessons. And so instead of only working with one person for the hour, I can be working with 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 people in that hour and be making a lot more income for the same amount of time. So that's just one way that I've grown and worked smarter and harder to grow the business. All right. Final thing is we're going to talk about some life lessons from chess. These are going to be a few deeper points that hopefully make you think. The first thing that I'd like to say is a life lesson I've learned from chess is understanding is the antidote to fear. All right, so let me give the chess background for this first. So it happens very often in a chess game that my intuition will tell me what move I should probably play. It'll point out a move to me, but that move might look scary. And a lot of people, if they notice a move that looks scary, they'll tend to just shy away from it and look for a safer option, something that's more easy to comprehend. And but no really strong chess player does that, right? When you see an opportunity that seems a little scary, you can't shy away from it. You need to investigate it further and really figure out the truth behind that move, figure out if it's good or bad. And the way to do that is to try to understand it better. So for me in chess, when I see a scary looking move, I'll do some calculation. I'll think 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 moves deep about, if I go here, what are they going to do? If they do that, what am I going to do? And usually after spending some time doing those calculations, I have a pretty good understanding of what's going to happen. I have a pretty good understanding of if that move is actually good or bad. And the fear that I originally had with that move is totally gone because I went from a place of not understanding to understanding. So the more you understand something, the less afraid you will be about it. So don't run from the unknown, seek to understand it. And in life, if you ever have an opportunity that comes up that might seem a little scary or it might be outside your comfort zone a little bit, don't just intuitively run away from it, but tackle that challenge head on, try to understand that opportunity better, and then you won't be so afraid of it anymore. Okay. 2 last things here. So time management. You can see in the picture here, we have a chess clock. Now, nowadays, we usually use digital clocks, not these old analog clocks, but okay, that looks better in media, movies, and all that. Okay, in chess, you have a limited amount of time to make all your moves. If you run out of time, you lose. And so an important skill that every chess player needs to develop is figuring out what moves are worth spending time on and what moves are not worth spending time on. All right. And that's very true in life as well. You need to do some time management. You need to consider carefully how your time is best spent. What things are worth spending time on and what things should you not spend so much time on. And I think we all have areas where we spend too much time. I, for one, probably spend too much time watching YouTube videos. I could probably be doing much better things with my life. Where do I spend too little time? I think everyone has some areas where they spend too little time as well. For me, I probably spend too little time with my friends and family. Right? That's something that is important. And maybe too little time investing in my hobbies. Sometimes I spend too little time studying chess. So you got to really manage your time well. And just like in chess, if you manage your time poorly in one game, and maybe you lose on time or you make a mistake because you're low on time, you can learn from that and learn to manage your time better in the future. And the same is true in life. If you know that you managed your time poorly one day, you can learn from that and go into the next day with a better plan for how you're going to spend your time. Okay, one final thing. This is a very important lesson that I've learned, and that is there is beauty in sacrifice. So the most beautiful chess games you'll ever see are ones that involve like a queen sacrifice or somebody giving away like almost all of their pieces in order to get a checkmate. And those are the best games because you're giving up all this material for something that's more important. And really anything worth achieving, right, is going to require sacrifice. You need to be willing to sacrifice in order to really get what you want in life. One of my favorite quotes is that if you don't sacrifice for what you want becomes the sacrifice. So, for example, if I'm not willing to sacrifice for my dream of becoming a grandmaster, then becoming a grandmaster becomes the thing that I'm sacrificing. So, yeah, be willing to sacrifice other things to make your dreams come true. And I couldn't finish this presentation without mentioning the greatest sacrifice of all time. And that was Jesus's sacrifice on the cross 2,000 years ago to pay for our sins. And this is probably the most famous Bible quote. Many of you have probably heard it before, but for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. And also here, greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. So sacrifice is one of the most meaningful things in life, and you need to be willing to sacrifice for the things that matter. Okay, that's it. That concludes my presentation. I know I went a little long, but thank you for listening, everybody. I hope you got some valuable things out of this, and I look forward to answering some of your questions.
All right, thank you, Joshua, for that insightful presentation. So we'll just jump straight into the Q&A here because looking at the Q&A list, we have a lot of questions to get through. So the first question is, how do you stay motivated studying the same thing multiple hours every day?
That's a good question. And I would say it's because it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. One of the beautiful things about chess is that there's always more to learn. There's always more to discover. Every single time I play a chess game, I get into a totally unique situation that I've never found myself in before. And so, chess is just one of those things that the creativity really never comes to an end. But I know what you mean. Yeah, it can be kind of repetitive, I guess, and a lot of other things can be as well. But I guess for chess, that's the main thing that's kept me going, is that every time I solve a puzzle, it's something brand new I haven't seen before, or every time I play a game, I get to see some brand new things as well. So
yeah, that definitely makes sense. You can study like different parts of the game each day. So next question, how did you manage to get students when you were teaching as a kid?
That's a good question. It was mostly related to that local chess club that I volunteered at. So starting from age 12, I volunteered as an assistant coach at the Holland Chess Academy in Holland, Michigan. And most of my one-on-one students actually came from there. So that's yet another case of me being involved in the local community and even volunteering my time in these local community events, and that paying off in the form of me getting some students. And one other thing I forgot to mention is you don't need to be an expert already to start teaching. A lot of people think that that's the case. They think, oh, I couldn't possibly teach somebody else. I don't know enough. If you know even just a little bit, you're good enough to teach a total beginner. If you know more than somebody else, you can teach them. So at 12 years old, I was probably still a worse than average chess player, but I knew a lot more than my 7 or 8-year-old students did. And so I was still able to teach them, and in helping them also help myself. And to answer your question, it mostly came from being involved in my local chess club and local community.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. You kind of have that starting network. Okay, so next question. As a beginner in chess, when I was trying to put the theory in application, I find it difficult. I find it difficult to do so in matches. Do you have any advice?
He's finding it difficult to apply the theory in his actual matches.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So one thing I will say is if you are a beginning chess player, the worst way you could possibly spend your time is by memorizing like opening theory. I know a lot of beginning chess players fall down this trap of just learning tons of openings, memorizing 17 moves deep in the Sicilian Najdorf variation. And then what happens is when you actually get into a game, your opponent plays something totally different on move 2, and then all that theoretical knowledge that you spent your time learning is pretty much all for nothing. You never actually get it in a real game. And this is one thing I forgot to mention in my presentation, but the way I learn my openings is almost exclusively just by going over games that I've played. All right. There are other ways that people learn their openings. There's this website called Chessable where you can like buy a course and you can memorize like 1,000 different lines and do it on repeat. That's not how I operate, because a lot of people, they'll get these courses and memorize tons of theory, but then maybe only 5% of that, if not less, maybe 5% they actually get to use in real games. Whereas with my method, I only learn opening theory that I've already encountered in online blitz games. And so if I've encountered it online, the chances that I'm going to encounter it in a more serious like tournament setting is a lot higher. I've already seen it before, so there's a good chance I'm going to see it again. And so I would say instead of spending your time learning all this theory and then trying to apply it, skip straight to the application step and then learn from your mistakes and learn, if I make a mistake in my opening in a blitz game, I'll look over it afterwards and figure out how I was supposed to play the opening instead. And that's what I would recommend. Learn from your own games.
Yeah, definitely. Because application is one of the best ways to learn. Okay, so next question. I think this is a pretty interesting one. So if you stopped playing chess, what would you do for work? Or if you couldn't play chess?
If I couldn't play chess, what would I do for work? I like to teach. I have realized that. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be chess. I like to teach other things as well. I just think in general, I'm pretty good at breaking things down in a way that people can understand. And so I would probably become a teacher of some other subject. I was even thinking of going to college to become a teacher and get a teaching degree and maybe become a math teacher. That's now if I had to pick another subject, it would probably be math, because I do quite enjoy math.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting.
Yeah, you just gotta understand who you are as a person, what your strengths are, and I think overall communication is a skill I've developed quite a lot, and that could be applied to not just chess, but other things as well.
Yeah. Okay, so another question. How did you decide that chess was your passion, or how did you like just know that chess was your calling?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. Because I had other interests, believe it or not. When I was in elementary school, middle school, even high school, chess wasn't the only thing that I did. In middle school, I was also in musicals, right? I was Jafar in Aladdin. I was the wizard in The Wizard of Oz. So, and I was in choir, like to sing. I was also in sports. I was on a basketball team throughout middle school that we went 12-0 every year, 12-0, 12-0, 12-0. So I was part of a pretty good basketball team. That could have been, my life could have gone in a totally different direction if I chose that. But it was really just a combination of chess was my favorite thing to do, and it was also the thing that I was best at. And so although I had all these other hobbies that I enjoyed, it was a conscious decision around the time I got into high school. It was a conscious decision that I was going to invest primarily in the thing that I liked the most and was the best at. And so high school, I didn't play basketball, even though I still, even to this day, I still love sports. I still love to play basketball. I'm 6'6", by the way, so that helps a little bit. But I didn't continue to play basketball in high school because I knew that that would take time away from the thing that I really wanted to focus my energy on.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, it does make sense that you were pretty good at basketball given your frame. Your
Yeah,
stature.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. How do you deal with losing or like setbacks?
Ooh, that is a good question. When I was a young kid, I did not deal with losing well at all. I would kick and scream. My parents would need to take me out of the tournament hall. But as I've grown up, as I've matured, um, I've realized losing is just part of chess. First of all, you're going to lose some games, and it's important to tell yourself, it is just a board game at the end of the day. I'm not going to let my whole week get ruined just because I lost at a board game. So it's good to keep that in perspective. That just if you have one failure, that's not that's not the worst thing ever. But I've also just went from thinking about losing as an attack on myself, an attack on my intelligence, an attack on my abilities. That's not a healthy way to look at losing, right? A lot of people think if I lose that, I'm less of a person or I'm stupid or no. I just look at losing now as a learning opportunity. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's really true. Every time I lose a game, I'll even get excited sometimes after I lose a game, especially if it's a lower stakes game. I'll get excited because I'll be like, all right, I know I'm going to learn a lot from this. Let me go see what the computer has to say, because there were a lot of decisions there where I did not know what to do. Clearly, I made the wrong choice. I'm really interested to see what I could have done instead. And so I guess, it's important to understand, like if you lose a game, don't take it personally, okay? Don't let that, devalue yourself at all. But instead try to learn from it and grow from it. It's the healthier mindset.
Yeah, definitely. So, um, I think we'll have time for two more questions. So, this one is, are there any specific kind of chess games or kind of motifs, openings that you really like? And then as like an addendum, we had a chess enthusiast in the audience ask about the viability of the Bong Cloud. So maybe you can answer both of them.
All right, sure. Well, my favorite openings, and again, only some of you are going to understand what I'm talking about here, but my favorite opening with the white pieces is the Queen's Gambit. Famously, there's a Netflix show named after that opening. But I love to play the Queen's Gambit. I've stuck with that ever since I was like 8 years old. And even to this day, it's my primary opening weapon with white. With black, throughout most of my career, I've played an opening called the Caro-Kann. The Caro-Kann defense. Now I play a lot of the Sicilian defense as well. One thing I will say, as I've gotten stronger and reached into these master ranks, it's become more and more important for me to diversify the openings that I play so that I'm not so predictable anymore. As I was coming up, I really just stuck with one set of openings. I was a specialist in a lot of ways. I learned one set of openings. I learned it really well, and I could just outplay people because I knew my openings better than they did. But now at the international master level, I can't get away with just playing my one set of openings anymore because everybody's going to be prepared for me. Everybody's going to know that those are the openings that I play, and they're going to come with a plan. And so I need to mix it up, do some different things sometimes to be a little less predictable. As for the validity of the Bong Cloud opening, no, maybe in bullet chess, maybe in super fast time control games. I will, if I'm doing a little bit of trolling, sometimes I will play this opening where I move 2 pawns up at the start, and then I run my king in a circle. It's like running the bases of a baseball diamond. And then I'll proceed to, beat people from there. I think I have like a 2,800 performance rating with that opening. So, but I don't really recommend doing that. It is kind of disrespectful. In fact, I've kind of stopped doing that because, you got to put yourself in your opponent's shoes. How mad are you going to be if your opponent plays such a disrespectful opening against you and proceeds to beat you? I don't feel like ruining other people's days like that. So I try to not mess around like that so much anymore and just stick to real openings.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Okay, so last question. What are your future plans and goals involving chess and kind of chess classes?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So personal goal, of course, I'm trying to become a grandmaster. But as far as coaching goes, my ultimate plan is actually to open up a chess center in the Detroit area. And so in a couple different cities around the United States, we see examples of really successful chess centers, which is essentially a chess store, but rather than focusing on selling chess merchandise, which, everyone just buys stuff on Amazon these days anyways. It more so focuses on running events, like tournaments, and running classes. And so that's really my big goal, maybe 5 to 10 years from now, is to open up my own chess center in the Detroit area that will focus on running tournaments and running classes for kids. And I think that would be a great benefit to the local community and a way that I could reach more people.
Okay, well, that concludes our Q&A session. Thank you so much, Joshua, for speaking today. And
Thank you for having me on.
Good luck in your tournament.
All right, yeah, thank you very much. Have a good
Thank
night,
you.
everybody.
Okay, so now we'll move on to a quick raffle and then wrap it up for the conclusion. So stay tuned for that.
We hope you gain valuable experiences and insight from our speakers. We would now like to take this time to recognize the role of our partners in bringing the Inspiring Role Model Virtual Conference to life.
While the conference itself is an annual event, with a brand new team of ambitious volunteers, we hope to make it better than ever before. We would have never predicted to have such a huge impact. Today, we hope you were just as blown away by our speakers' incredible stories as we were.
Our gratitude towards everyone's effort to build this conference is beyond measure. So, in addition to bringing professional role models to the spotlight, we would like to give our diligent partners, speakers, and team members a chance in the limelight as well. This phenomenal team devoted their valuable time to support today's youth and invest in a brighter future. Their passion and dedication are nothing short of extraordinary, and they truly deserve our praise.
We especially want to highlight the work of two organizations that have gone above and beyond to make sure that this conference would be a success. A huge thank you to Illuminate Business and Envision STEM for all of their work. This has been such an amazing event filled with such inspiring speakers. Even though the conference is over, we hope that the Inspiring Role Models virtual conference experience lasts for longer than today. Hopefully, hearing from today's speakers has given you advice and inspiration for your future career paths. Minghan, what was your favorite part of the conference?
I really like hearing about our incredible speakers' background. When talking to someone that I admire, it's often easy to forget that they had to face many of their own challenges and obstacles. But from this event, hearing from so many stories from our speakers and the challenge that they face along the way, it really inspired me, and hopefully all of our attendees, to go out and do something, because we all start somewhere. I also enjoyed to reach out to people who I always want to speak at the conference and listen to their presentation during the rehearsals. What about you, Olivia?
I would have to agree that all of the rehearsal meetings we had with our speakers were my favorite part about planning the conference. I really appreciate our speakers for taking the time out of their busy schedules to prepare and rehearse with us for this conference. Being able to hear our speakers' stories, their struggles, and how they overcame them was also really fascinating and inspiring.
Definitely. Now, let's talk about why inspiring role models are important. If I had to answer the question, I would say that role models are important because they can share their own experience to students, not just their expertise. This can give us insight into how skills are applied in the real world.
I absolutely agree. Role models help guide us on potential career paths. They use their knowledge and experience to help those of us who aren't as far on our own career paths and journeys. Throughout the day, you have heard speeches from our successful speakers with various occupations, which may give you a hint about what potential career might suit you.
We also want to give a huge thank you to our team at MYE. Over the course of the past 8 months, every single one of you has worked so hard to make this conference a reality. From reaching out to guest speakers, putting together the conference schedule, building the conference website, creating promotional posters, and so much more. You have all been amazing team members. Thank you so much to our youth leadership team, and of course, a huge thank you to Coach Grace for supporting our team throughout the process.
If you're interested in participating in more of MYE's events similar to this conference, we have a few resources listed on our screen. You can check out our blog, myebeat.com, which is a platform for our students to publish their own articles. We publish bi-weekly articles in 7 categories: eats, arts, giggles, media, self-care, STEM, and study. We also offer virtual STEM, business, finance, and public speaking classes, among others, for students grades K through 12. Check out our website, myefound.org, to learn more about them. Finally, you can subscribe to our newsletter at bit.ly/mye-news to be the first to know about new volunteer opportunities, events, and general updates. All 3 of these links are currently being sent in the Zoom and YouTube live stream chats right now.
Throughout our conference, you all were given the opportunity to submit raffle tickets through the QR codes given at the end of each presentation. Now that the responses are all in, our team will randomly choose a winner for each of our prizes shortly after this event concludes. Winner will be notified through email for any required information.
Now, before we end the stream, just remember, keep impacting. Just like the inspiring role models of this conference, you can all start making changes to the world. And with that, this is the end of the 4th annual Inspiring Role Models Virtual Conference. Minghan and I were honored to be your hosts today, and we hope that you have an amazing rest of your day.